Uh, yes, yes, we are waiting.
I hope you can view my screen, sir.
Yes, your screen is
Hello.
fine. Yes, screen is visible. You may.
Thank you. Thank you, first of all, for giving me this golden opportunity to present my paper. If I am B. Sharmishta Chakravarti, currently I am communication trainer and quality analysis expert in Kolkata. Today I am presenting my paper on sequential art and the Indian imagination, a reader-centric analysis of comics. This thesis is based on reader response approach to comic book studies. Now, drawing from reader response theory, particularly the works of Wolfgang Iser, Robert Jaws, and Stanley Fish, this thesis investigates how readers interact with the medium of comics, engaging with its unique semiotics and narrative structures. This thesis examines comic books as a multifaceted medium that combines visual art and textual narratives, emphasizing the reader's role in meaning-making. Additionally, the theories of MacLeod and Charles Hadfield provide a framework for analyzing the formal qualities and storytelling mechanisms that define comics as a distinct art form. Now, if I go to a theoretical background, this comic studies or comic studies framework, here is Scott MacLeod, who analyzes the visual grammar, panel transitions, and the interplay of text and image. And Charles Hadfield explored comics as a hybrid medium and the tension between form and context. Now, the key theorists are Wolfgang Iser, puts emphasis on the reader's imaginative involvement in filling narrative gaps, and Robert Jaws focuses on theory and the historical evolution of reader expectations. Stanley Fish concentrates on the role of interpretive communities in textual meanings. Now, what is reader response theory? This reader response theory employs a qualitative research methodology, including textual analysis, reader surveys, and case studies of specific works. Texts from diverse genres and cultural contexts will be examined to understand how readers engage with the medium. Now, according to R.C. Harvey, comics are sometimes four-legged and sometimes fly and sometimes don't, to employ a metaphor as mixed as the medium itself. Defining comics entails starting a Gordian knotted enigma wrapped in a mystery. Sir, I believe I am audible to everyone. Hello?
Your screen,
Yes, you're audible.
however,
Yeah.
yes, your
Can
screen
you
is
see
now
my
visible.
screen? Yeah.
Yes, yes.
By focusing on Indian comic readers, this research foregrounds the localized, culturally situated readings of graphic narratives, aiming to illuminate how regional, historical, and affective frameworks mediate reader responses. Ultimately, this study proposes a theoretical model that recognizes comics as occasions, we are shocked by their fulfillment. We question, we muse, we accept, we reject. This is the dynamic process of recreation. Now, what is the historical context? Earlier in 1926, Liu already described the reader response principle when he maintained that a poem unread is not a poem at all. However, modern reader response critics have drawn from this idea that one cannot see the thing itself, but only the image conjured in the mind as induced by stimulative sense perceptions. In 1967, Stanley Fish published Surprised by Sin, the first study of a large literary work that focused on its reader's experience. In an appendix, Literature is the Reader, Fish used the reader to examine responses to complex sentences sequentially word by word. Now, what was the influence on criticism? Two of easiest reading assumptions have influenced reading response criticism of the New Testament. And the first is the role of the reader who is active, not passive, on the production of actual meaning. The reader fills in the gaps or areas of indeterminacy of the text. Now, what we mean actually transactional reader response theory. Transactional reader response theory, led by Louis Rosenblatt and supported by Wolfgang Iser, involves a transaction between the text's inferred meaning and individual interpretation by the reader influenced by their personal emotions and knowledge. Now, what is subjective reader response theory? Subjective reader response theory associated with David Blanche looks entirely to the reader response for literary meaning. Individual reader response theory, employed by the Norman College, believes that a reader's motives heavily affect how they read and subsequently use this reading to analyze the psychological response of the reader. As early in 1926, however, Levy was already describing the reader response principle when he maintained that a poem unread is not a poem at all. Now, we can concentrate on, if we consider the reader response criticism, forum development and comic book renaissance. This reader response criticism critics investigated how readers accept, while reading, improbable or fantastic things, Coleridge's willing suspension of disbelief, but discard them after they are finished. As the forum developed, the volume and length of letters became a reliable gauge of overall reader response to developments in the comics themselves. Despite this, the 2010s saw a renaissance of comic book letter columns and many comic titles still read. Hugo James Mack published the first science fiction magazine, Amazing Stories, in 1926, allowing for a large letter column that printed readers' addresses. First comic letter column, the first record The forum developed and the volume and the length of letters became a reliable gauge of overall reader response to developments in the comics themselves. In 2015, writer David Harper published his list of the top 10 pattern including works from various image comics. Now, what is the implications for future research? Continued exploration of reader engagement with comic books can yield significant insights into cultural narratives and reader dynamics. Further, interdisciplinary studies will enrich the understanding of comics as a complex narrative medium. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, for giving me this time, and special thanks to Dr. Pritesh Chakraborty, who is my friend, principal and guide, and to one of my dear friends, Amrata Tushar. Thank you to the resource person here. Thank you.
So, ma'am, so was the
Sir, your voice is breaking, sir. Hello?
just thanking you. Thank you for the presentation. And
Okay, so
I
was
will
it all right?
thank you for my
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
uh thank you so much. Good. I remain.
Hi, Somanand. For some reason, maybe your voice is breaking up. I guess you are calling Bidangshu as the next presenter. Bidangshu, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. I can hear you. Am I
Okay,
audible?
loud and clear.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are audible. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. You are audible.
Okay, so thank you, Somanand, so much for presiding over the sessions. And I guess due to some reasons, your connection is giving you some trouble. So I will be taking over from Somanand right now, and I'll continue till 4 p.m. So Vedangshu, go ahead with your presentation. Be mindful of the time limit. I will be reminding you when your time's up.
Is my presentation visible, sir?
Yes, it is visible.
Okay. Is it full screen now?
No, it's not on the. It's not full screen in the sense that we can see the slides on the left, like the thumbnails on the left.
Yeah. Let me go for the entire screen then. Sorry for the inconvenience.
And by the time Vedanshu is starting his sharing his screen, thank you, Pritesh, sir, for I think there were some network issues in between.
So, is it visible, sir, now for the
Yes,
entire
Yes,
screen?
yes.
Okay.
yes, it's on full screen. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you, Bidan.
Okay. Yeah. So, can I start?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. I am Vedanshu from Mysore, Kolkata. I am actually doing PhD in Department of Chemical Science, working on synthetic organic chemistry. But as people may have multiple passions, comics is one of them for me. So, I have found that there are multiple works on Indian graphic narrative But if we are talking about what focusing on solely Bengali comics, there is still very less. The reason for that may be due to the less research, due to the lack of proper documentation. But there are some bloggers, I should say the name of them, like Indranath Banerjee, Sagat Varman, and some of others, who have worked for last 2 decades to digitize, go for proper documentation of this work, which may lead to me to come before you to present this work. I have started to work on this project 1 or 2 years ago with some of my collaborators. We are actually trying to do some empirical analysis based on the data, the corpus data we are developing on Bengali comics. But that methodology and terms are needs a bigger time and bigger frame. So here I am just going to give an overview on our findings that we have found while working on Bengali comics, on the representation of women in Bengali comics, and we will only focus on the comics created in West Bengal, India, uh, for this presentation. So before I go for the Bengali comics one, I want to spend a little bit time on what is comics. There is no proper definition still now, but the most famous one is given by Art Spiegelman, that is that it's a sequential art. To add on this, I can say that it's a combination of visual and verbal languages, which people used to say graphic narrative. And in contours, I can say that comics are a medium that uses a combination of image and text, often arranged in sequence, to convey a story or information. I want to conclude this slide with my favorite, uh, one of my favorite creators, Scott McClure, that comics are a way of seeing, a language of pictures and symbols that transcends time. So, if we start for Bengali comics, it started by a female creator, uh, Sukhalata Rao, in 1921 December. From this, she has published Jamon Kormo Temni Phol, which is regarded as the first Bengali comics here. So it spanned over more than 100 years by numerous numbers of work and creators. These are two majorly celebrated people from Bengali comics, Narayan Devnath and Mohit Choudhury. And there are other people like Dilip Das, Tushar Chatterjee, Mukhi Mukhopadhyay, Johanna Suyog Bandyopadhyay, and so on. So Bengali comics, I want to divide them as my convenience in three parts. Like the translated one, the most of the popular Bengali comics that we have heard is 19 Asterix, in Royal Comics, Chacha Choudhury by Pran, but all of them are actually translated one. They are not originated from West Bengal, and so I am not focusing on this part. The other major part of the Bengali comics are comics from inspired from literature, like classic literature like Durgesh Nandini, Sadashiv Chandepar, and like from famous characters like Kakababu, Feluda, Teni, Rajkumar, and all. I'm not focusing on that part too. I am focusing on the original terms defined that the comics which are solely expressed through graphic narratives like Hadamoda, Matul the Great, Fonte Fonte, Tappara, Tunku Daktar, and all. So I can start with Narayan Devnath, as I've said that he is one of the most celebrated creator in Bengali comics with his volume of work. His work spanned from 1961 to 2013, a very long period. But if we go through his work, we have found that his works are predominated by only male characters. And presence of female characters are exceptionally rare, and that is also in very minor a supporting role. As you can see that I have given 4 panels here from different comics. My characters' presence as like aunts, um, moms, which is also like among 80 panels, the dedicated panel is 4, 5, 6 maximum. So these are like just not even minor roles, but some supporting random characters. So if we go from humorous to serious comics done by him, we'll find that the presence is more. Actually, In terms of presence, that is quite a little bit same, but the role is a little bit more significant here. And the only exception in his work is Sutki Mutki. Uh, he introduced two female child as protagonists in a comics anthology series published in Suttara from 1962 to 67. So, if we go through Mohit Chaudhary's work, his works and from his work start same as Naran Devnath in 1961, span a little bit less up to 1995. His works also predominated by male characters like Naran Devnath. Even I should say that most of his comics don't have any female characters. There's no female characters present in most of his comics. But there is a change that the comics having female characters have major and important roles. So Devnath has more comics which has female characters, but their role is really less. In terms of Mohit Chaudhary, the number of comics with female characters are, are less actually, but the comics has that those are major and important roles. Here is two comics like Bondhu and Muktidol Ratanlal, where the central character is a girl child, and when he is drawing for a serious one for the mature audience, you can find the presence is more. Like Ella from Nishitarata Ravan worked as an assistant of a private detective. You can find her in physical combat and more other important places and roles throughout the comics. So now we are coming from Tushar Chatterjee, who actually introduced proper female characters in the history of Bengali comics for the first time. He's worked mostly for young adult and adult comics, but the children comics which he have done also contain female male characters like Mumu from W and Kundahati. As I have already said, for him the presence of women is much higher than Devnath and Chaudhary's work. For his work, representatives have also been changed. That they are coming from very major and important roles. Like Meena in Danovirat and Isidra work as one of the major characters. Ratna worked as one of the most important supporting characters for Kalo Hatet Thaba. He first introduced woman villain in Bengali comics, also drew bold version of women for the mature audience too, like Niharika in this film. I am coming from Dilip Das. He's still working. He's still working mostly on juvenile comics for both serious and juveniles, not going for so much young adult and adult. He first introduced multiple female lead comic series like Chutki Warki, Chuno Punti. Representation of women for minor character is much higher than Devnath's work in terms of Dilip Das. Like comics like Chokka Bok and Kuda Boitaning, the panels present here have multiple female minor characters and their roles has increased significantly. In terms of if I go by panel for Devnath's work, it's like only 2-3 panels. For Dilip Das, we have found that 50% or 40% of the panel contains. So as we are only talking about male creators, I want to shed some light on female creators too. For Bengali comics, there are very less female creators. Among them, also 4 only created original comics, as I have defined. So the first one is already I have said Sukolata Rao. She did only 4 comics, no female characters, and all are juvenile short universe comics. Moitri Mukhopadhyay among these 4 has worked significantly, and her work in terms of volume is the most known. She did total 4 original comics. All are full-length big comics. One is for mature audience, which is Provana Swapnavango. So we have found significant presence of female characters in all of the comics. Comics for the mature audience is more and major presence of women. The other female creators are Kavita Prabhakaran Mukhopadhyay. She created series named Narar Comics in Sandesh. Female creators are mostly absent and all are very juvenile and short universe comics. Another one is Dola Putokundu. She introduced title characters quickly for most of our comics, and we can find significant presence of women in case of her work also, like Mukhi Mukhopadhyay. I want to shed some light on modern days too, but this will be very brief. I just go for some important points to give a just idea that how Bengal economics is going on in 21st century. So first I said that Jugannath, he introduced Bichu Jalashokti is the longest running series in Bengali comics with a female lead protagonist from 2002 to 2023 on Suttara. Arup Chandra first introduced female lead protagonist, private detective Purva and her assistant in serious comics, in Bengali comics, which is Kalimpong House and Jugai Kundu Uttar House, two works still published. Kaushik Kundu's Neil Jagada series introduced Patricia Gomes, one of the major roles, and numerous other minor female characters too. So if we go on for the most known comics for nowadays, that is Surya Gangavati Sapada, his early adventures are really lacking of female representations, but later on, if we go for that, we will find major female characters like actress Dolphin Ganguly in Kolkata War Father and so forth, so on. For Sayan Pal, his Bonku Dakhtar is predominated by all male leads like Bonku Dakhtar and his friends. But we find that female supporting characters.
Vedangshu, you just have 1 more minute, so I would
Okay,
request
sir.
you to
Yeah, yes, surely. So, and Sumantagu's Mithuni anthology also has taken numerous female characters, but also represent them in very diversified form. So I just shared two three observations of mine. Actually, there is basically no change in representation for particular creators through the years, like Narayan Devnath from 1970 and 2012, which representation is same. But if you are going for different era than when they are started, there is a proper significant difference. As I give some qualitative diagrams of that. And overall, juvenile comics has less female character presence in respect of comics for mature readers. Humorous comics have less female representation, but not significantly. And most interestingly, gender of comics creators did not have any significant effect on female representations over the time frame. Like Tushar Chatterjee and Maitri Mukhopadhyay both the same female representation before talking about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vedangshu. Next is Dinisha Naik and Dr. Panda.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Yeah, let me just share my screen. Is it in full screen, slideshow mode?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Yeah. So, good afternoon, everyone. I am Dinisha Nayak, working with Dr. Srischandra from IIT Bhubaneswar, and the title of my presentation in today's paper is Decoding an Alternative History of the Vietnam War, a study of post-memory representation through G.B. Tran's graphic memoir, Vietnamica. This is the outline of my presentation. What we are going to do today is to walk through a text called Vietnamica, which we will be analyzing from two different lenses. One is of sites of memory, another is of post-memory, and also to look at how this entire process unfolds in the text. Before going into the theories, let me give you a very brief introduction of the graphic memoir Vietnamica by G.B. Tran. It's a graphic memoir which is obviously personal and it is situated in a particular context, published in 2010. It focuses on the time duration of pre, post and during Vietnam War, which happened in 1975. And also there is a parallel narrative which is happening in the early 2000s. It's a family saga of Tran and his family Vietnam after their evacuation from Vietnam during the Vietnam War. So the narration is in a flash forward and flash backward way. G.B. Tran, in one of his interviews, he stated that the goal behind this work is to preserve his family's history and and it becomes an archive of the histories of individuals such as Tran's parents who were the survivors of the Vietnam War. And these individual stories did not engage with the mainstream representation, of the war, which is basically mostly westernized, right? So moving on, coming to the first lens, which is the sites of memory. It's a French term called as lieu de mémoire. The propounder of this concept is Perenora, who basically refers to these sites of memories as those physical, symbolic, functional spaces of memory where memories are crystallized or preserved. For example, monuments, museums, archives, rituals, and even the text that we engage with. So he argues that these sites of memory emerge because in the modern society we have lost the real environments of the memory, such as the living traditions or the collective practices that our older generation used to perform. Basically, he highlights that how memory is embedded in rituals and it is transmitted orally and even through images. And the modern memory, it is very much dependent on these material traces, for example, through archives, monuments, objects. And our generation is very much obsessed with capturing these events, for example, through recordings, documents, or even photographs. And we also need the visual proof, which is through images and videos, or even visiting the museums. So what he is reflecting is on how the sites of memories have moved from being something that is lived and embodied to something that is very stored and preserved. It's also a reference to what Tran says, that he wants to preserve those memories before it is lost. So the focus is on the fear of forgetting than to the vitality of remembrance. Coming to the second theory that I am going to use, it's post-memory, and it has been propounded by Marian Hirsch. She defines it as the relationship that the generation after has with the generation before, who has undergone a period of collective trauma or adversity, and the generation after can only engage with these experiences of the previous generation through the transmission of those memories or experiences through images, storytellings, or with the behaviors with which they grew up. So let me give you a very Indianized version of it. So recently Keshari 2 has been released. So the way we engage with the Jallianwala Bagh massacre of 1919, even though we weren't born in that period, but we continue to research on it, and we continue to look into the survivor narratives, diaries, photographs, and documentaries, and we continue to preserve and commemorate it through all these mediums of books, films, and various documentaries. That is how we are engaging with the past and trying to fill in these gaps. However, one of the crucial aspects that I should mention here is that while the generation after, which I am referring to as the second generation, they're engaging with the past, but they're also influenced by their own experiences, and also how they are dealing with this inherited or transferred memories, which again it is making an alternative form of looking at these narratives. So we shall dive into the book. Here I have tried to juxtapose two pages from the text, page 5 and 6. On the left hand side, we can see a very dark colored picture of Vietnam. On the right hand side, we have a very lighter tones, right? So the first site of memory is that of the airplane. Let us look at the last panel on the right hand side page, and then the first panel of the left hand side page. So what is happening here is that on the darker picture we have trans parents who are very much confused and are in a state of chaos, and it is in contrast with his parents who are in a very relaxed state in the right hand side picture. So the entire imagery that is being created here is that there is a contrast between their evacuation time and the present state of normalcy. So the airplane itself becomes a temporal bridge, a moving site of memory, where Tran's mother is trying to transmit all the memories of the past that they had in Vietnam. The second site is obviously Vietnam, and we can see that on the right hand side we have a developed city of Vietnam, whereas on the left hand side it is destroyed and it is very war trodden, right? So such that Tran's imagination here works in a dual way, like he has to picture both of these images, one that he is living right now and another that he has imagined. Further, the final message that we can see here, that thank you for flying with us and welcome to Vietnam itself is very complicated, because Tran is also dealing with both the memories that he is trying to create on his visit back to Vietnam, and the past or the traumatic memories of his parents. The second example can be this page, page 59. Let us look at this page. I could locate two sites of memories here. The page shows the visit of Tran's family to his ancestral grave in Langson. The first site is that of the ancestral grave, which is a physical marker of loss, history, and it shows continuity of the past. Further, the second site of memory is that of the ritual itself, for example, bowing down, of mourning, which is symbolic in nature. Further, this entire practice of mourning is also reinforced on Tran through his mother's command that you need to show respect to whatever your father is doing. So, this reinforcing duty is also a kind of preserving sanctity of the memory. Further, this page also shows that Tran, as the second generation, is feeling very disconnected and distanced, while his parents are deeply engaged with the collective and communal remembrance of ancestors. He is very much bothered by the environmental discomforts. So, coming to the conclusion, to conclude, Vietnam America presents memory as layered, as in the older generation lived, can only be understood by the younger generation through narration, transmission of stories, and probably by visiting the sites of memory. And trans engagement with this familial past shows that memory isn't always welcomed. It can be uncomfortable, unwanted, or even misunderstood. So, this again is derived from the generational distance, wherein the first generation is deeply moved and the second generation feels a little alienated and annoyed. Here, post memory comes as a tool to create an alternative form of looking at history, looking at these sites of memories, offering a counter perspective, wherein the generation after is trying to make up or understand, to fill in the gaps within the memories through imagination and emotional engagement. So, these are my references. Thank you so much for your patient listening.
Thank you so much, Dinisha, for your presentation. I will now request Roshni Sen to present her paper.
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Okay. Good afternoon, organizers and audience. I am Dr. Roshni Sen, Assistant Professor of History in the West Bengal Educational Service. The title of my paper is The Sindhi Community and the Partition Memories. The partition of India in 1947 had a profound and a lasting impact on the Sindhi community, shaping their collective memory, identity, and diaspora. Sindhis, who are an Indo-Aryan ethno-linguistic group originating from and native to the Sindh region of Pakistan, shared a common Sindh culture, history, and language. Apart from the traditional homeland, Sindh, in Pakistan, significant Sindhi population exists in India, mostly partition migrants and their descendants, most of whom adhere to Hinduism. Sindhi Hindus were an economically prosperous community in urban Sindh before partition, but due to fear of persecution on basis of religion and after large-scale arrival of Muslim refugees from India, they migrated to India after partition. They had a hard time in India developing their economic status with no native homeland to claim. They chose to live in states that had similarity with Sindhi culture. Despite all that, they were successful in establishing themselves as one of India's richest communities, especially through business and trade. Much of Sindhi partition memory is preserved in oral traditions, stories, songs, poetry, and personal testimonies. These are often filled with nostalgia for Sindh's pluralistic society and a grief over dislocation. A unique aspect of Sindhi partition memory is the sense of trauma without recognition. Their suffering was less visible due to the lack of violent massacres compared to Punjab and Bengal. This paper will explore Sindhi experience of partition, a topic historical which received less attention compared to the narratives of Punjab and Bengal. The paper will look into partition experience, which reflects the emotional cost of leaving behind home, property, culture, relationship. It will further highlight the silent suffering of women, often left out of official histories. The narratives will also reveal the challenge of retaining Sindh language and culture in post-partition India. Further, it will show the adaptability and entrepreneurial spirit of the community in rebuilding lives across India and elsewhere. Unbordered Memories, Partition Stories from Sindh by Rita Kothari is a poignant anthology that captures the rarely heard voices and experiences of Sindhi Hindus during the partition of India in 1947. Kothari not only translates stories but also provides a rich cultural and historical context that deepens the reader's understanding of Sindhi identity. The book emphasizes how the partition was not just a political event, but a deeply personal rupture affecting language, tradition, and everyday life. Kothari's work is significant for preserving a vanishing heritage and for giving voice to a community often left out of mainstream partition discourse. It serves as both a literary and a historical archive of collective memory and resilience. Holi, a short story written in Sindhi language by Qazi Abdul Jalil, within the translated anthology, explores the emotional trauma of separation that was triggered by the partition and weaves a narrative around the sense of longing and pain experienced by individuals who were estranged from their loved ones. The short story portrays an intimate conversation between the narrator and the 5-year-old nephew, whom he lovingly named Holi. Holi innocently asks his uncle why he has been named so, propelling the narrator into a whirlwind of nostalgia and memories of pre-partition Sindh. Struggling to find words to explain a festival so alien to the nephew, he alludes color and joy to friends who would frequent his house during Holi and splash colors on everyone. Jalil juxtaposes the two characters, one who is melancholic for a pre-partition Sindh and the other a young child who cannot understand why the family does not play Holi anymore. Holi explores how festivals and cultural practices once shared harmoniously among different religious communities in Sindh lose their collective meaning after the rupture of partition. Holi, the vibrant Hindu festival of colors, becomes a symbolic reference point for what was lost: communal harmony, shared space, and a syncretic culture that blurred religious lines. In Sundri Uttamachandi's Bhuri, Sindh is personified as a woman named Bhuri. Despite facing poverty and helplessness, Bhuri retains her virtue, reflecting the community's resilience and enduring connection to their lost homeland. Bhuri, once celebrated for her youthful beauty and grace, undergoes a significant metamorphosis in the aftermath of partition. The narrative describes how poverty has eroded her physical allure, yet it emphasizes that her inner beauty, characterized by dignity and resilience, has only strengthened her. Bhuri, alongside her husband, shoulders the economic responsibilities of a family. Her ability to adapt to new circumstances without compromising her self-respect reflects the community's transition from being refugees to self-reliant individuals. The shift underscores a subtle yet powerful narrative of gender equality, where Bhuri's role is not defined by victimhood, but by agency and contribution. The transformation is not merely personal, but symbolic of a broader experience of the Sindhi community, which, despite losing its homeland, has preserved its cultural and moral integrity. Bhuri's story also highlights the trajectory of the suffering of a woman, often left out of official histories. Sindh Stories from a Vanished Homeland by Saz Agarwal weaves a compelling tapestry that not only chronicles loss and displacement, but also celebrates the resilience, identity, and the heritage of a community that had to recreate itself in exile. In Shahz Agarwal's evocative collection, Sindh's story from a vanished homeland, the short story Kites and Umbrellas, stands out as an exploration of cultural displacement and adaptation. The story is deeply rooted in personal recollections of Situ Savur, Agarwal's mother, who was just 13 years old at the time of migration. Situ's memoirs offers a window into the everyday life of Sindh before the upheavals. She reminisces about the land where children flew kites year-round, a testament to the region's dry climate and the cultural significance of kite flying in Sindh society. However, upon arriving in Bombay, the family encountered the monsoon rains, a stark contrast to the arid condition of Sindh. Situ's initial bewilderment upon seeing umbrellas, an item unfamiliar in her homeland, symbolizes the profound cultural adjustment the migrants had to make. The umbrella, a mundane object in Bombay, became a symbol of the new and the unfamiliar, highlighting the dissonance between the past and the present life. In another work of Shah Agarwal, Sindh's Tapestry, one memorable instance is Radhika Chakraborty's use of photographs to construct her family history. The essay, which in itself is demonstrative of this act of reconstruction, presents the Sindh's identity's complex relationship with memory. The photograph, handiwork of R.N. Mathrani, grandfather, and M.P. Mathrani, his father, though seemingly dispensable to their creators, represent to the author the visual imprints of a past that she can no longer access. In many ways, the essay is evocative of an ode to the construction of the Sukkur barrage and to the building of her house in Delhi by her forefathers, two episodes that testify to the Sindhi community's spirit of enterprise and fortitude. Though this theme is jovially demonstrated through the narrative of Atul Khetri. Khetri relieves his own transitioning from a Shikarpuri businessman to a stand-up comedy. While Chakraborty's piece is defined by nostalgic reminiscence, Khetri's words impart the experiences of the present. They carry the light-hearted immediacy that one comes to associate with the stand-up routine. The narratives bridges two temporally different worlds, from the world of his former business, Kartek Computer Services, to the world of stand-up comedy by evoking what he refers to as the Sindhi entrepreneurial spirit. Time and again, Khatri insists that his transition into a comic was an outcome of calculated deliberation. Being a stand-up comic and a Sindhi is a serious business, he added. In Jyoti Bachani's My Nani's Papad container, papad being a culinary symbol of Sindhi heritage imbued with syncretic flavor, is very significant because when the family lived in Sindh before partition, the container, with many other things, traveled to India from Sindh and remained in the writer's maternal grandfather's house. When all things were being discarded as junk, the container reminded the writer of her childhood memories, and she got it ready to use it and to carry it in her different homes across the globe. She wrote, "This container has traveled with me to several of my homes. Its contents nourish my body, and its storied past and memory nourish my spirit. The seemingly simple objects, utensils, trunks, fabrics, tools, brought by families during the partition of India are far more than just practical belongings. They reminded descendants not just of where their families came from, but also of what they endured to survive. Sometimes, in the absence of photographs or official records, these objects become a tangible connection to a homeland left behind. They serve as emotional anchors in the lives of those who inherited them, a storehouse of memories, culture, and identity. Through them, the past is not forgotten, but carried forward, allowing new generations to understand the richness of the heritage and the pain of displacement that shaped it." Sindhi documentaries and films also delve into the experience of Sindhi Hindus during and after the partition of 1947, and I shall draw an attention to one of it. Sindhustan, directed by Sapna Moti Bhavnani, is a in 2019-20 is a personal documentary that explores the post-memory of the partition through the lens of the Sindhi Hindu refugees. Bhavnani, who hails from a Sindhi family that migrated from Karachi to Mumbai, uses statues as a medium to narrate the stories of displacement, and loss. What sets Hindustan apart is Bhavnani's unconventional and unique method of storytelling, using her body as a canvas. She documents the oral histories of the Sindhi diaspora and tattoos the story onto her legs in traditional art styles from India and Sindh, including Madhubani and Ajrak. The act symbolizes the journey her ancestors took from Sindh to India, literally and metamorphically, carrying their stories on her legs. This merging of personal narrative, art, and history makes the film both intimate and symbolic. Bhabnani herself, of Sindhi heritage, becomes not just a filmmaker but also a vessel for her community's collective memory. There are other documentaries and films like the Akhri Train, The Last Train, and also Watan by Pankaj Kanchandani, which offers further such insights into the themes of displacement, identity, and loss. And finally, the Lost Homeland of Sindh is a permanent gallery dedicated to the Sindhi community, recently inaugurated in 2024 within the Partition Museum in Delhi. Located at the Dara Suko Library, it focuses on Sindhi experiences of partition, and it exhibits certain artifacts like the Murari or the balcony, which offered shade in the arid climate of Sindh, the which exhibits such artifacts like the pengu or the swing, the Sindhi work of lacquer wood, which is the Sindhi varkis, the Ulasnagar matrix, the Ajrak ancient block printing technique, and the hand embroidery, Sindhi global banking and network maps tracing historical routes by sea and land created by the Kutchi tribes also reflect the themes of displacement and also loss and displacement. I shall finally end by saying, thus the Sindhi memories of partition are marked by a deep sense of loss and displacement and resilience. Sindhis migrated en masse, often without direct violence, but under intense pressure and uncertainty, and came to India without a designated state. Their testimonies, experience, and memories are varied and have innumerable renditions, and I quote Anchal Malhotra: "If I considered the partition an archaeological site and the many experience of those who witnessed it as the site's structural sedimentation, then the deeper I excavated, the more I found, and that too in innumerable renditions." Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sain, for your expert deliberation. Now I will call upon Kaveri K. ma'am. The floor is yours for your presentation.
Hello, good afternoon. Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay. So my paper, I'm Kaveri, and I'm a PhD candidate at the Center for Comparative Politics in JNU. So my paper is titled as Recasting Culture, Ethnic Reimagination of Tiya Identity in Contemporary Kerala. So Tiyas are a caste community from Kerala. They are generally considered as a part of the broader category of Iravas, another dominant OBC caste in the state. So this paper looks at the new identity claims of Tiyas, how they assert a distinct politics of identity from the Iravas. So I'll just read out my paper. A press conference was held in Calicut city of Kerala in January 2012 by Dr. Nelliyat Shyamalan to present his findings on tracing the DNA origins of the Tiya community. Although Dr. Shyamalan is a cardiologist rather than a trained genetist, his personal interest in his community's history led him to explore genetic ancestry as a means of constructing an alternative historical narrative. According to his claims, the DNA of the Tiyas shows a close match with that of the present-day populations in Tian Shan region of Kyrgyzstan, a Central Asian country. This claim played a significant role in catalyzing new organizational initiatives such as Tiya Mahasabha, the Global Tiya Initiative, and Tiya Shema Sabha, all these organizations that aim to consolidate and mobilize the Tiya community, including its diasporic members. The effort to reconstruct history through genetic research garnered notable traction within the community, not so much for its scientific validity, but for the historical narrative and collective identity it appeared to affirm. The research also indicated that DNA testing shows similarities with the Indo-Aryan group and established an Aryan history for the community, claiming that the community's ancestors must have originally migrated from Africa through Europe and later settled in Malabar region of present-day Kerala. Tiyas are a former untouchable caste community mostly seen in the northern region of Kerala. Historically, Tiyas have been identified with the broader Irava group, primarily found in the central and southern parts of the state. This association has led to the Irava as a broader caste category and Tiyas being mostly identified as the Iravas. While the caste system as a structure is inherently sustained through certain kinds of boundary maintenance, the secularization of caste made these boundaries fluid, altering the earlier rigidity of caste. Moreover, associational politics of democracy prompted caste groups to come under broader umbrella categories to enhance their representation and access to resources. The Tiyas have similarly engaged in a process of negotiating their boundaries, associating with the Iravas. This association did not emerge after the formation of the state of Kerala. Rather, it took shape during the anti-caste movements in the region during the colonial era. Tiyas in contemporary Kerala is entrenched in the process of boundary making. Boundary making is an evolving social process in which groups establish, adjust, and negotiate distinctions that define their identity and relationship with others. In this way, community identity is not viewed as a set of interactions between pre-established static groups. Rather, it can be understood as a dynamic process through which groups are formed and restructured by establishing and redefining the boundaries that differentiate them. Such a process of boundary making is visible among the caste groups like Tiyas as they indulge in renegotiating the existing boundaries. While boundary making is a central concept in anthropological studies on ethnicity, caste categories are inherently fluid and continuously evolve beyond their traditional frameworks. Boundary making is a conceptual tool here to analyze and understand the ongoing transformation among caste groups in consolidating their group identity. The Tiyas have been reconstructing their history to emphasize their distinction from the Iravas while also reasserting a regional identity rooted specifically in the Malabar region. This includes accentuating ritual forms and practices peculiar to the region, which they argue are largely different from the traditions of Iravas who inhabit the southern region of Kerala. The Tiyas also seek to establish a new historical narrative, which includes claims of ancestry connected to the Aryan race, setting them apart from the Iravas. This reevaluates the widely held belief that the Iravas and the Tiyas shared a common Sinhalese origin. They had been associated with the Iravas, sharing a collective identification in which the influence of Srinarayana Guru, a prominent figure in Kerala from the community who had led the caste reformation movement in the state, and the prominence of the Srinarayana Dharma Paripalana Yogam, a community association formed during this period, which had played a central role in shaping and asserting their group identity. Both caste groups, having faced systemic discrimination and marginalization, actively resisted entrenched caste hierarchy through broader process of collective identity formation and community building. As part of the anti-caste movements, they engaged in these they engage through also undertook a cultural reclamation by reconstructing a shared Buddhist past. This involved embracing an accepted historical narrative that linked them through a common origin, specifically a Sinhala lineage and a Buddhist heritage. This shared Sinhalese past played a key role in shaping and reinforcing their sense of common identity. So in response to enduring caste discrimination, marginalized communities have historically constructed political identity grounded in anti-caste ideologies. Central to this process was the strategic adoption of a Buddhist identity or the symbolic threat of conversion to Buddhism, which served as a powerful form of resistance and a means to assert dignity and equality in the public sphere. Among the Tiyas and Iravas, the constructed Buddhist past served as a foundation for collective identity and helped to foster a broader sense of political solidarity that transcended caste boundaries. However, the once homogenized narratives of such identification now appear to be fragmenting. For instance, while the Tiyas previously gained political strength through their close association with the Iravas, there are signs of emerging shifts and internal differentiation with these unified frameworks. In the 21st century, the alternative historical narratives within the Tiya community have gained increasing prominence, offering a rearticulation of origin that challenges the dominant historiographical traditions. This narrative serves as a critical intervention that contests the long-standing representation produced through colonial knowledge system and institutionalized hierarchies. Positioned within broader efforts to reclaim subjugated past, they seek to establish cultural legitimacy and historical agency for the community. By disrupting inherited frameworks of interpretation, these accounts not only question the exclusions embedded in the conventional histories, but also foreground the politics of knowledge production and its role in sustaining social marginality. These emerging narratives do more than merely contest the imposed notion of marginality. They represent a conscious and strategic reimagining of the Tia community's past. So these new histories that had been constructed through new ancestral interpretation of caste and forging an ethnic identity to the Tias, they reflect a broader project aimed at establishing a distinct caste identity. And central to this effort is the differentiation of the Tias from the Iravas, a group with whom they have historically been associated. So in this phase, two interconnected narratives took shape, both significantly contributing to the formation of a distinct Tia identity. And one of the most notable shifts was the increasing acceptance of the Indo-Aryan origin theory, which began to replace earlier accounts linking the community to Dravidian or Sinhala Buddhist root. By aligning with a Aryan lineage, the Tia sought to establish clear social and cultural distinctions from the Iravas and to elevate their status within the broader social hierarchy. Although the Tiyas contested the caste discrimination earlier being part of the anti-caste movement, their adoption of an Aryan origin narrative reveals how hierarchical ideologies remain embedded within attempts to transcend marginality. Although the reimagining of collective memory aimed to transcend the legacy of caste-based subjugation, it inadvertently reinforced existing social hierarchies by drawing upon dominant narratives of cultural superiority. The emerging historical narrative surrounding the Tiyas reflects an effort to construct an ethnic identity that remains deeply embedded within the structure of caste. Rather than confronting the caste system, this reimagining of the past allows for a subtle redirection where ethnic distinction is foregrounded as a means of repositioning the community. In effect, caste is not dismantled but reinterpreted through an ethnic idiom that affirms difference while navigating the constraints of the established hierarchy. Caste, traditionally conceptualized as a rigid hierarchical system of social stratification, has in this context been re-articulated through the discursive framework of ethnicity. For groups like the Tiyas, identity claims are increasingly anchored not solely in ritual or occupational status, but in narratives of ancestral origin, genetic lineage, and racial descent. Ethnicity in this sense becomes a mode of reconfiguring caste identity, mobilized to differentiate, elevate, and territorialize community belonging. The reinvention of the past by the Tia community, exemplified by the Kyrgyzstan origin narrative advanced through genetic research, is not an isolated phenomenon. It is part of the broader discursive pattern in which alternative histories, articulated through oral tradition, mythical narratives, literary representations, and community memory, have gained prominence. These narratives, previously scattered or localized, appears to have undergone a process of consolidation in contemporary times. Thus, ethnic revival becomes the language through which caste distinction is articulated and revalorized, allowing a community historically marked by marginalization to resituate itself within the hierarchies of caste modernity. All these narratives point toward a shared pattern, the emergence of a revivalist histories within marginalized community. A common thread underlying these efforts is the historical experience of caste-based discrimination and the persistent imprint of marginalization. The burden this inherited social stigma continues to shape their collective memory. In response, these communities engage in the reconstitution of history as a means for reclaiming dignity and distancing themselves from the social residues of the caste subordination. The revivalist turn thus becomes a strategy to transcend the spectre of marginality embedded in their caste identity. As these communities attempt to renegotiate their place within the caste hierarchy, reimagining the past becomes a powerful means of reconstituting their present. Thus, reinventing of the past is not an all thing that can be seen among the marginalized caste group. Valorizing elements of past and detaching themselves from the concept of marginalization that was embedded within the history of community had been seen among various communities that had undergone caste inequalities in India. Ethnicity and tradition are not fixed, rather groups actively invent or reinvent their past to serve present needs. For instance, as Apadure notes, in modern nation states, cultural differences becomes a valuable commodity for marginalized groups to claim recognition and resources, when nation states demand fixed identity. Marginalized groups respond by emphasizing what makes them distinct. Ethnic boundaries are redrawn through cultural performance. Thus, reviving tradition, whether through festivals, new texts, or academic histories, is often aimed at inclusion under these modern categories. Moving into the realm of ethnic discourses within caste, the enduring presence of caste as a cultural entity indicates that India's process of modernization has not entirely eradicated traditional social hierarchies. Cultural crop of caste, characterized by substantialization or ethnicization, conceptualizes caste not as a rigid status hierarchy, but as a form of ethnic grouping or community identity that enriches India's cultural diversity. This perspective shifts the focus from viewing caste as a source of inequality to
Kaveri ma'am,
recognizing
you
it as
have
a
3 more minutes. Sorry for the interruption. 3
oh,
more minutes, please.
okay, thank you. By substantializing caste communities emphasize their unique cultural attributes, traditions, and history, thereby transforming caste from a symbol of social stratification into an ethnic identity. This process of ethnicization allows caste groups to assert their distinctiveness and celebrate their heritage, associating themselves more with ethnic communities rather than as ranks in a hierarchical social order. The transformation of caste into a cultural identity transcends mere cultural expression and delves deeply into the persistent realities of social stratification and power dynamics. However, this cultural framing can also serve to obscure the entrenched social hierarchies and discrimination that many caste groups continue to face. By presenting caste identity through a cultural lens, there is a risk of masking the systemic issues of inequality and marginalization that accompany these caste distinctions. So it becomes evident that caste identity, rather than being dismantled, has been re-articulated as a form of cultural identity, one that facilitates caste-based mobilization while operating under the guise of cultural distinctiveness. In the case of the Tiyas, this transformation is particularly significant. By reframing their identity through the narratives of Aryan origin and historical distinction, the community has strategically positioned itself to claim social mobility and political relevance. This redefinition has not only allowed the Tiyas to contest their marginal status, but has also contributed to the broader culturalization of politics in the region, where assertions of caste are increasingly expressed through the language of culture, heritage, and historical pride. As such, the Tiya experience exemplifies how caste continue to shape political spaces. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kaveri ma'am. Next, I would request, and I'll try to pronounce your name as well as I can. Is it Kiara? I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. Nasisi, you are up next, and if you have a presentation, you can go ahead.
Can you see the presentation?
Not yet.
Okay. Now?
Yes, it's visible now.
Now? You see? Okay, merci. Thanks. Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank all the organizers of this conference. I'm truly grateful for the opportunity to share my research with all of you today. Before turning into my specific presentation titled Languages of Relation, Jacques Derrida and Edouard Glissant Across Border, I would like to briefly situate these two authors within the broader context of post-colonial thought. Though they come from distinct intellectual and geographical background, both thinkers engage deeply with the legacies of colonialism and both challenge dominant structure of languages, identity, and power. Jacques Derrida was born in 1930 in French colonial Algeria to a Sephardic Jewish family. His early life was marked by marginalization as a Jew under Vichy law and as an Algerian subject of French imperial rule. This experience profoundly shaped his later philosophical works. Derrida is widely known for developing the idea of deconstruction, which interrogates the hidden hierarchy and opposition embodied in Western metaphysics, such as speech, writing, presence, absence, self, other, male, female, and so on. In the context of post-colonial studies, Derrida's reflection on languages, belonging, and exclusion offer a powerful tool for understanding how colonial languages and identities are imposed, internalized, and resisted. Edouard Glissant, by contrast, was born in 1928 in Martinique, a Caribbean island that is both geographically and culturally shaped by colonization, slavery, and aftermath of empire. Glissant was not only a poet and a philosopher, but also a major figure in the Francophone post-colonial literature and theory. His work centered on poetics of relation, a vision of identity and the language as fluid, interconnected, and irreducible multiple. He introduced key notions such as pluralization, the unpredictable and creative mix of culture, and the right to opacity, which assert the ethical and political value of a difference that resists full transparency or translation. What brings Derrida and Glissant into dialogues is their shared resistance to fixed identities, monolingual ideologies, and colonial structure of knowledge. They both insist that language is not neutral, it is shaped by history, marked by power, and always open to transformation. Their works compel us to rethink the border between languages, culture, and identities, not as a barriers, but as a dynamic and generative space of relation. Let's get into the heart of analysis, starting from Jacques Derrida. In his 1996 work, Monolingualism of the Other, Derrida starts by making a striking statement. I only have a language, it's not mine. This paradoxical formulation is central to his reflection on politics of language. Born into a French colonial setting, Derrida was educated exclusively in French, the language of colonizer. Yet this was not an inherited or chosen language in a traditional sense. It was imposed, institutionalized, and ideologically loaded. For Derrida, this situation dramatized a more general condition. No one truly owns the language they speak. Language is never fully ours. It precedes us, forms us, and always carries the trace of the present of the order. This idea challenged notion of linguistic and cultural purity. In fact, Derrida thinks foregrounds language as a border, not merely a system of communication, but a threshold that marks and a settled identity. It is a place where the self encounters its own limits, its own foreignness. Language is not only a means of expression, but also a structure of inclusion and exclusion. It enforces norms, privileges certain identities, and marginalizes others. In this way, Derrida opened up a powerful critics of colonial domination, which seeks to eliminate the diversity and particular language or creole language by reducing them to silence and absorbing them into a single depersonalized language. That is what Derrida calls monolingualism, imposed and necessary at the same time. While contrast with Derrida emphasizes on estrangement and absence, Glissant also enters into dialogues with him by offering a more affirmative and relational view of linguistic multiplicity. In his work, published in 2009, Philosophie de la Relation, Glissant conceptualizes identity not as a singular or enclosed, but as formed through relation, through a contact, difference, and exchange. One of his key concepts is creolization, which refers to the dynamic and unpredictable mix of languages and culture, especially in the Caribbean area. For Glissant, creolization is not a loss of identity, but a creative force. It generates new forms of speech, thoughts, and being. Forms that refuse the binaries imposed by colonial epistemologies, as we have also seen in Derrida thoughts. Equally important is his idea of the right to opacity. In a world that demands us constant translation, legibility, and assimilation, Glissant defends the rights of all individuals and all culture to not be completely settled in pre-established label, but to remain free from any limiting determination. Opacity is not obscurity. It is a mode of resisting the total gaze of the West. It also means a refusal to be reduced into stereotypes or explained away through a dominant framework. In this sense, for Glissant, the border is not a limit, but a seat of possibility. Language does not serve to define a close identity, but to open toward order, toward a relation without erasing difference, but instead accepting and valuing them as riches for our identity. What unites Derrida and Glissant, despite their divergent tone and methods, is their shared attention to literature as a space where borders are intact, challenged, and transformed. For Derrida, there is no distinction between literal and figurative, between self and other. It's often a space where languages reveal the own instability and where meaning is always deferred. In this sense, literature performs the condition of living at the border, never fully at home in any languages and always translating. Glissant similarly understands literature as rhizomatic practice. Rhizome is a notion that Glissant takes from the thinkers Deleuze and Guattari in their work at Thousand Petal. It indicates a multiplicity of a network of relations that extend without having accent and without having a fixed goal, one that resists linearity and closure. In Glissant's work, literature becomes a way of dwelling in plurality and diversity, of listening to the echoes across languages and geographies from all over the world. Literature is where the poetics of relation takes form, not as a theory, but as an embodied aesthetic experience. For both thinkers, literature does not erase boundaries. It reconfigures them in an innovative way, it transforming them from dividing line into areas of meeting and continuous exchange. Ultimately, both Jacques Derrida and Edouard Glissant understand border not as a problem to be solved, but as an ethical place, a space where we confront the limit of our understanding and where we are called to answer to each other. Derrida ethics based on unconditional hospitality. It's in the recognition that the other lies there, that we speak and we are understood only through the language of the other. This produces an ethical demand to remain open to what we cannot fully master or understand, and to take care of the diversity of the other and value it as a wealth. Glissant ethics are relational. It calls us to resist dominant not by affirming the purity of our identity, but to embracing interdependence, a world in which we are always in relation, always in translation, always unfinished and open to change and encounter. To conclude, both Jacques Derrida and Edouard Glissant offer powerful tools for rethinking languages, identity, and the literature in the wake of colonialism. On the one hand, Derrida shows us the structural impossibility of linguistic purity, the way languages always carry the trace of order. On the other hand, Glissant affirms the critical power of pluralization and the value of relational identity. They both reimagined the border not as a closure but as a threshold, a space of risk but also a space of possibility. In our increasingly polarized world, where borders are reaffirmed and the difference is often seen as a threat, their works remind us that language itself is a practice of relation that connects our multiple identity, pluralizing and modifying them all the time. Language is therefore for both writer an ethical, political, and imaginative act that allows us to reach the other. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much for your expert deliberation. Now I will request Voishi Banerjee and her co-presenter to take on the presentation.
Hello, good afternoon. So my presenter and I will be presenting a paper on From Nirupama to Binodini, comparing and contrasting the women of Tagore. I'll ask my co-presenter to begin with the paper.
Hi, I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. So I'll begin with the paper. So, wait, let me present the slide. Is it visible?
Yes, it's visible. Can you go full screen?
Wait, I'm trying, but is it visible now?
No, it's visible, but if you can change the slides, that's all right, I think.
Okay, all right. So I'll begin with the paper. So any discussion on literature, we believe, is incomplete without Tagore. And as two young women who are also students of literature from Bengal, we believe that Tagore's portrayal of women is an extremely intriguing area of study. That's because it is nothing short of revolutionary, especially when we place it in the context of his time. Tagore's women are never just side characters, they serve a definite purpose in his works. They actively live, struggle, resist, and transform. From the silent defiance of Nirupama in Dena Pauna to the emotional rebellion of Binodini in Joker Bali, his female characters are rarely conventional women that adhere to the societal structures of the time that we live in. Instead, they constantly subvert the expectations placed on them, and more often than not, they act as mirrors to society. Never mere puppets, they embody a range of responses to the various injustices and constraints that they face, that is, they are morally and psychologically layered. They offered insight into Tagore's evolving vision of gender norms and dynamics. Of course, the body of literature that has been produced by Tagore is immense, and it is a huge challenge to include all his works or characters in a single article. This paper merely attempts to trace the sheer range and variety of these women by highlighting 4 short stories and 2 novels from his huge collection of works. It delves into Tagore's nuanced and progressive portrayal of women as they navigate their way through marriage, patriarchy, duty, and desire. First, we go to Dena Pauna, which was written in 1891, and it explores the themes of patriarchy and the exploitative dowry system that existed in 19th century Bengal. Nirupama is the daughter of Ramchandra, and she is said to be married to a wealthy groom. However, the groom's family demands a huge amount from her father as dowry, and he is unable to produce the promised amount on her wedding day. Despite such obstacles, the wedding does take place, but following this, Neeru has to endure a lot of mental torture at her new house. She is not taken care of properly, her in-laws constantly taunt her, and her father has to face a lot of humiliation every time he comes to visit her. Ramchandra finally manages to accumulate the remaining amount, but when Neeru finds out about the situation, she refuses to let her father pay her in-laws anymore and sends him back with the money he had brought. Naturally, Neeru's actions become known to her in-laws and her neglect becomes worse. Not long after this, she falls sick and it ultimately leads to her untimely death. Now, Nirupama's character is a mature one. While she does not explicitly rebel against her in-laws or openly express her defiance, her silent act of resistance is what moves us all. From her wedding day itself, Neeru is aware of the fact that her in-laws are not the best of people, especially with their refusal to move forward with the wedding after realizing that the entire dowry amount is not yet paid. And that is just the beginning of her endless suffering. She not only has to deal with verbal abuse, but a lot of physical neglect as well. She grows desperate to be taken to her parental home, but this proves to be a nearly impossible endeavor, as her father-in-law refuses to let her visit her family until her father completes the payment. So when Neeru finally finds out about the situation that her father has been secretly paying her father-in-law behind her back, this is where she decides to put her foot down. She does not let her father give any more money to her in-laws, knowing perfectly well that this essentially means saying goodbye to her dreams of visiting her old home ever again. When her father tearfully tells her that, she firmly states that she would rather never visit her family again than letting her father go through further dishonor. As I have mentioned before, this is an act of quiet defiance. She chooses torture over her father's disgrace. Next, we move on to Shasti, which is set in rural Bengal, and it revolves around 2 brothers, Dukhiram and Chidam. Both of them are very intelligent, but they are very selfish. They are very selfish, and they are very self-centered. They are very self-centered, and they are very self-centered. They are very self-centered, and they are very self-centered. They are very self-centered, and they are very self-centered. They are very self-centered, and they are very self-centered. They are very self-centered, and they are very self-centered. They are very self-centered, and they are very self-centered. They are very self-centered, and they are very self-centered. They are very self-centered, and they are very self-centered. They are very self-centered, and they are very self-centered. They are very self-centered, and they are very self-centered. They are very self-centered, and they are very self-centered. They are very self-centered, and they are very self-centered. They are very self-centered, and they are very self-centered. They are very self-centered, and they are very self-centered. They are Radha and Chandra, their wives, they do not have the most amicable of relationships and are engaged in petty arguments more often than not. One night, Dukiram and Chidam return home after a long day at work, and Dukiram asks his wife for food. Radha rudely replies that there is none at home, and in the heat of the moment, Dukiram kills her with eggs. The whole household naturally delves into panic, and Chidam asks his wife Radha to take the blame of her sister-in-law's murder. Now, Chidam also teaches Radha to plead innocent in court, and he teaches her a false narrative to defend herself. But when she is taken to court, Chandra declares that she is indeed the murderer and debunks any other opinion that might state otherwise. Chandra is, in a way, she is opposed to Nirupama's character. She is bold and assertive. She is not submissive, and even in marriage, she often clashes with her husband. In the light of the fateful situation, she realizes that she is nothing but a mere object in her husband's eyes, and that he is more than willing to sacrifice her to protect his brother. Which is precisely why Chandra is initially shocked to hear her husband's request. The fact that he can even come up with a plot like this is disconcerting to her, and not without reason. The turning point comes in when Chandra refuses to play the role of the conventional obedient wife. Despite being innocent, she does not make the slightest attempt to save herself from imminent death. Her silence is deliberate and it is symbolic. It is an act of resistance against the betrayal she feels from being treated as disposable. Therefore, she does not confirm, neither does she choose to forgive. She decides instead to choose her own fate, an agency she has not been given either by her husband or by the patriarchal system that has failed her. Her epiphany is that she would rather die than beg for mercy in order to be saved and to spend the rest of her life with a man who did not think twice before sacrificing her. Chandra, therefore, is powerful, and she is an unconventional female character who outright rejects the patriarchal conventions of her time and the standards that they lay out for women. After this, we shift our gaze to, I think now I will let my partner read. She is going to read her part and then I'll come.
Thank you. So after this, we shift our gaze to two popular short stories by Tagore from the early 20th century. The protagonist of Nostronie, which we can say as The Broken Nest, written in 1901, is Charulata, a happily married young woman to an affluent man, Bhupati. Just the way this paper has been looking at the then social scenario through the lens of Tagore's pen, this short story too highlights the then society by showing the drastic age gap between Charu and her husband. This short story again helps us to gain an interdisciplinary approach if Satyajit Ray's Charulata is also put into consideration. Though Ray's film is not a direct book-to-screen adaptation, which usually is not the case too, it does manage to capture the nuances that Tagore has put in his creation to make the character of Charu most well-read at all times. For instance, her vibrant nature conceals her loneliness in the Ondor Mahal, or the inner world, as we could say, as she jumps from one window to another to see the world outside. While Charu accepts her mundane life, yet though she does not enjoy it much, her sister-in-law, on the other hand, Monda, is a rather traditional woman who is content with her role in the family and its expectations. Tagore's impossible genius gets revealed here when he puts the traditional woman like Monda and a free-spirited woman on the pursuit of self-discovery like Charulata in the same household. The stark differences have been pointed out. Charulata's brother-in-law is excited about his publication in a reputed daily. He wants to share the good news with both Monda and Charu. This behavior or excitement of Amol of putting both the women on the same plane is not acceptable to Charu, as she thinks of Monda as someone inferior for conforming to societal expectations that easily. Therefore, it can be said that Charulata has a hope of resistance against the melancholy of her life. This can also be seen with the change of her life with the entry of Amol, her brother-in-law. Amol became her happy place where she could be her own self, whereas Monta found happiness in the humdrum of their kitchen. The range of women characters has again been probed. Moving to the next short story that we selected, Stril Potro, which is also can be called Letter from a Wife, is about a girl named Mrinal the protagonist of the story, who leaves her husband and his house due to certain reasons and goes to live in Puri forever. She then writes a letter from there to her husband in which she mentions the patriarchal society and her spouse. In this story, Tagore portrays various social issues such as child marriage, caste discrimination, a male-dominated society, and a lack of equal opportunities for women. Mostly in his short stories, Tagore presented the suppression of women by a male-dominated society through third-person narrative, but in this story, he used first-person narration. The protagonist of the story is Mrinal, who is very sensitive, intelligent, and strong-headed, and the first female protagonist in Indian literature to protest against the male-dominated society. She is Major Bo, which is the second daughter-in-law of the house. Mrinal mentions in her letter the pain she faced and the sufferings of women around her, and also that women never complain because of becoming so habitual of their conditions. Mrinal was married at the age of 12 years, which is very early, and she was 27 when she wrote the letter. She suffered extremely during these years due to annotations of bahus, or the wives in the house. She saw the critical condition and mistreatment of Bindu, her sister-in-law's younger sister. Mrinal wanted to save Bindu, to do so because Bindu committed suicide, being tired of abusive marriage and mistreatment with her by her own family and relatives. Her death raised an argument between Mrinal and other people. They all said, "It has become a fashion with women to die by setting their saris on fire," and also said, "Nothing but played with the ending of change women's saris, and not this is necessary to bodies of the lions by such dramas of Bengal." A very impactful line, I feel. As illustrated in the story, Mrinal is distressed as a daughter, a wife, as well as a mother. She mentions in her letter that this letter is from her as an individual and independent woman, and not from Major Bo, or the second daughter-in-law of the family. She observed two women characters who were silently and silenced and repressed by the society. One was her sister-in-law, and the other was Bindu. And this is where her response to the oppression of the society was different. Now I would like my partner to continue with the rest of the paper.
Next, we move on to Ghore Baire, which was written in 1916, where we are acquainted with one of Tagore's most compelling female characters, Bimala. The novel is set in early 20th century Bengal when the Swadeshi movement is gaining momentum. The novel revolves around three major characters: Bimala, Nikhilesh, her husband, and Sandeep, Nikhil's friend. Bimala is brought to us as a quintessential upper-class Bengali wife. She is limited to the inner chambers of her husband's mansion, and she is content to do so. But soon she meets Sandeep, and she is taken easily by his charm. His passion, his way with words, they all captivate her, and her attraction to him is not merely romantic but also intellectual. She is drawn to his ideas, she wants to help him and the movement, and this makes it all the more easier for him to manipulate her. She finds herself questioning her values and beliefs. On one hand, there is an ideological conflict. Sandeep wants Nikhil's market to stop selling foreign goods, while Nikhil refuses to comply with this, for he knows that doing so will further push his workers into poverty. There is also a moral conflict. Bimala does love her husband, but Sandeep's charming ways have trapped her. She feels guilty, and she ultimately resorts to stealing from her husband's accounts to help him. This is a significant moment, for it shows further moral decay on her part. Not long after this, Bimala is faced with the revelation that Sandeep's nationalism is hollow, manipulative, and hypocritical. He is obsessed with leadership, and he uses others like Bimala for political gain. Bimala realizes this, and it deepens the turmoil within her. Shortly thereafter, Nikhil is caught in a riot, and the conflict leads to his death. Bimala realizes that she has lost both her morality and the man who used to truly love her. Bimala represents the eternal conflict between moral clarity and seduction. Sandeep gives her a purpose, something to fight for, but what she also falls prey to is his naive idealism. In the end, she has to grieve not only her husband's death, but also her moral corruption. She undergoes a lot of ideological transformation, and all these phases ultimately help her realize her own folly. Bimola is one of the most significant of Tagore's female characters because she is so incredibly layered. She is a great example of how Tagore gives life and depth to his female characters. They are not mere symbols or
Sorry to
one-dimensional figures.
interrupt,
Living, living individuals.
ma'am, but your time is about to be up. Would you please wrap up?
Yeah, sure. I'll tell my partner to read the conclusion.
Yes, so the last argument of our paper, that human relationships are indeed complex, but some do become irksome, causing one agony, and which is shown in Chokher Bali, another novel by Tagore, through the characters Ashalata, Bihari, Mohendra, Binodini, and Rajlokhi. And they became stained at times with one another, which paves the way for the understanding of the complexity of human relationships. Having tea is something considered to be very normal nowadays, but for an upper class Hindu widow, it was not a matter that falls within the realms of everyday choices. Binodini, the young educated widow, introduces tea to her Shoima, Rajlokhi, who happens to be a bit apprehensive about her choice of having it. However, when her sister-in-law arrives on a fine day in her room while she is about to have tea, she opens up to her about her recent habit of having tea. This feminine space where the ones present are aware of their circumstances, yet they are engaging in an act which is not permitted by the society, is a very important document of the subversions that takes place in the society that is interested in widows bottling up their emotions. For instance, a widow's identity is associated with the fact that they are a widow or not, a separate set of customs for each of them. The film explores a fine line within them and how two women come in contact with each other. There's a particular instance in the narrative that manages to resonate with the reader for the longest. It was Vijaya Dashami, or the 10th day of Durga Puja. It is in this moment where the married women smear vermilion to the goddess Durga and other fellow women, provided they have not lost their pasha. In this particular instance, Ashalata, the newly married wife of Mohendra, with her face smeared in scarlet, comes to wash her face. Binodini, the lady separated for years from any colors but white, was there to pour water on her hands for cleaning her face. Ashalata, with her eye itching from soap, stands perplexed, saying Bali, Bali, and Binodini takes a minute or two with a smirk on her face to let her experience the pain. This scene has been explained well in the movie Chokher Bali by Rituparna Ghosh, again an interdisciplinary approach with his cinematic excellence. To conclude, I would say we would like to once again make note of the fact that what truly sets Tagore's women apart is their authenticity. They are nuanced in a way that defies the norms set by many other male authors of his time and perhaps even now. He has penned them in a way that makes it seem like he has not merely looked at them from the perspective of a man, detached and out of touch. Rather, his writing actually delves into the personalities of these women, which is why their pains and struggles appeal so strongly to our consciences. They are not seen as either perfect, flawless beings or as mere sexual objects. They are living, breathing human beings with flesh and blood that dare to feel, speak, question, challenge, and even make mistakes, something which makes them achingly human. They cannot be put into boxes either, that is, they are not one-dimensional. As readers, we empathize with them, feel angry at their occasional naivety, but mostly we feel connected to them. The aim of this paper, therefore, was to focus on the journeys of the women we have based it on. These journeys are distinct, but they are also connected. What brings them together is their consciousness of injustice, their moral agency and desire for emotional autonomy. In an era where women were mostly silenced in both reality and literature, Tagore's women shine through in a way that makes them relevant even today. And with this, we end our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Next participants, Snehalata and Akriti, are you ready with your presentations?
Yes, sir. We are just we're going to start our presentation in a moment.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Akriti Sidhu, and I have co-authored this paper with Snehata Mishra. We are students at the Department of Psychology of IIM University, Gurgaon, and today we will be talking about a paper 4-4, Developing Narrative Empathy for Antagonists and its Impact on Personality. So, Books, shows, movies, especially fiction, have a huge impact on the viewer's psychology, especially when the individual is highly invested in an epigenetic unfolding of the character and the character arc. The media that we consume drastically affects our personality, as these mediums act as socializing agents through which certain behaviors and schemas are being pertained into our conscious and unconscious mind. Empathy, in a broad sense, is understood as the cognitive and emotional reaction stimulated from the observed experiences of another individual. Even if the stimulus is not affecting us directly, but still a response is elicited. Narrative empathy is that aspect of social intelligence that allows the individual to sympathize and rationalize the actions of a fictional character as a response to the individual empathizing with them. When narrative empathy is heightened, individuals may develop such deep emotional connections with fictional characters, particularly antagonists, that even their moral judgment becomes blurred. This is often seen in how characters like Amy Dunn, Joe Goldberg, and Theo Faber are perceived. Despite their manipulative, violent, or sociopathic tendencies, audience frequently rationalize or romanticize their behavior. Amy stages her own disappearance, frames her husband, yet she is still viewed in a positive light and seen as empowering rather than dangerous. Joe, a serial killer, justifies his crimes through internal monologues, leading many people to view him as misunderstood or even romantic. Theo, portrayed as a calm, caring therapist, is ultimately revealed as obsessive and controlling, yet, because the story is told from his perspective, readers are drawn to sympathize with him. This becomes especially concerning when such content is consumed during formative years. Many viewers engage with such media or are introduced to such media narratives around the ages of 13 to early 20s, when the prefrontal cortex is still developing and moral reasoning is not formed. At this stage of life, personality traits are still in flux. That is, they keep on changing, they keep on varying, and exposure to morally complex characters without any critical distance, without any critical understanding, can influence the way we perceive right and wrong, potentially shaping our real-world moral frameworks. This raises the research question. Is the development of narrative empathy affecting our personalities, and is it influencing our personality traits to such a level that we view the world a little differently? To further understand the way these variables interact, we conducted a literature analysis. Alatavi and Harshan and Mutual Identities, Fostering Empathy Between Readers and Characters in Reading a Work of Fiction, seeked to understand how literature, particularly fiction, stimulates empathy in individual readers. The results revealed that the intensity of a reader's connection with the character, while they introspected the text to their understanding, affects their emotion and development of empathy. Del Campo, in Sympathy for the Devils, an analysis of the villain archetype, traces the portrayal of villains since the late 19th century. The modern villain or the antagonist is exemplified by a character that is somewhat relatable, charismatic, or arouses our sympathy. The terrors of the modernist period, that is corruption and war, have given birth to a villain who helps us cope with questions and examine answers that heroes, by the virtue of being too good, cannot answer. Villains are a way for readers to explore the darker aspects of humanity. Calarco et al. In Absorption in Narrative Fiction and its Possible Impact on Social Abilities suggests that the exposure to narrative fiction may be related to increased empathy. Absorption and identification promotes social skills by making the act of experiencing another person's perspective and emotions feel more real. Black et al. In Who Can Resist a Villain? Morality, Machiavellianism, Imaginative Resistance, and Liking for Dark Fictional Characters explore how individual traits relate to liking dark fictional characters. Liking such characters is negatively linked to imaginative resistance and moral purity, but positively associated with Machiavellianism. Personality showed no significant effect, but it was seen that imaginative resistance and this moral purity may help individuals to prevent moral disengagement. Labiat in The Dark Side of Narrative Empathy, a narrative persuasion perspective on whether fiction reading can lead to antisocial beliefs and attitudes, explains how narrative transportation, empathetic identification, and moral disengagement impacts readers' critical and moral scrutiny of antagonist character. Immoral protagonists who internally focalize their narratives obscure their moral transgression, that is their motive, that is the way they are depicted. And they depersonalize their victims and direct the reader's empathy and facilitate antisocial behaviors. These novels and these movies, to a certain degree, promote or persuade the reader to actually perceive humanity in a very cynical and amoral attitude, according to Lapierre. To further explore the relationship between narrative empathy and personality, we conducted a research. An exploratory qualitative research design was applied. 15 participants aged 18 to 20 were selected through a screening process involving a list of shows, movies, and books featuring antagonists portrayed both positively and negatively. The aim was to identify whether these participants romanticize these antagonists or experience narrative empathy towards them. Data was collected via semi-structured interviews of participants who met with the screening criteria. That is, they had either watched or read one of these movies or the specified work of media. Following the interview, the Neo-FFI-3 personality inventory, particularly Form S, that is meant for adolescents, was administered to quantitatively assess traits such as openness, conscientiousness, extraversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Data analysis was done through thematic analysis, and it focused on exploring links between narrative empathy towards antagonists and personality traits. So the key themes that were identified through the thematic analysis were justification and accountability. So participants that were high in agreeableness often showed empathetic tendencies, acknowledging the emotional or psychological factors behind a character's action, leading them to justify their motives without condoning the behavior. Quoting one of the participants, "They are not the justification of these actions, but I can understand his reasons." In contrast, those with moderate to high conscientiousness emphasized accountability, valuing justice, responsibility, and consequences. This was evident in statements like, "He was doing it out of love, maybe he should have faced consequences." Another theme was emotional resonance through backstories. Participants that were high in openness and neuroticism showed increased empathy towards protagonists that were given a proper backstory or that were given complex emotional histories. They became emotionally immersed yet maintained a clinical and critical perspective, demonstrating a balanced empathetic response. As one participant said, they felt very normal. People like them may exist in real life. This suggests that rich backstories enhance narrative empathy by humanizing even morally ambiguous characters. Rationalizing the antagonist was another theme that commonly came up. So participants that were very high or even moderate in openness but low on conscientiousness were more likely to romanticize immoral actions and even rationalize them to a certain degree that they were attributing intelligence or situational factors with them, especially in the case of Joe Goldberg. This aligns with Bandura's theory of moral disengagement, that we, to a certain degree, after we are exposed to a particular media, as seen in Zazong's mere exposure effect, we become morally desensitized to ambiguous behavior. This reflects a fragile moral resistance that varies with narrative frame. Participants express this by saying at some point you feel that they had a reason. Such responses highlight how moderate to high openness combined with lower conscientiousness allows space for justifying antagonists' behavior. A very common theme was glamour and charisma. Participants high in extraversion and openness were especially drawn to the charm and aesthetic appeal of antagonists, and they believed that because the character was physically appealing or the actor was good looking, they could let certain things go. This was consistent with the findings of Black, Barnes, and Barron in regards to how lower imaginative resistance correlates with greater enjoyment of dark characters, particularly when moral purity is low. However, participants with moderate agreeableness still applied ethical judgments, demonstrating partial imaginative resistance. One participant particularly said the casting people, they made him look very charming and intellectual, and he was very sweet and kind towards the neighbor's child. Another participant mentioned he looked good, so people forgave him. Conditional empathy could be seen in participants that were high in conscientiousness and low in neuroticism. They showed empathy towards the antagonist only when vulnerability or remorse was evident. These participants resisted narrative persuasions unless clear humanizing traits were present, maintaining strong ethical boundaries. Individual personality differences significantly shape how people engage with and interpret morally complex characters in narratives, and the way they interact with these characters also affect their personality. It's a vice versa case. High openness leads to greater narrative empathy and capacity to humanize with morally grey characters. High agreeableness leads to higher likelihood of forgiving minor flaws but still holding firm on moral judgment. Low conscientiousness was linked with moral flexibility in interpreting motives of the antagonist, whereas neuroticism as a whole was linked with heightened emotional engagement, especially with trauma-based character arcs. As these come under a trait theory of psychology, they vary in nature, thus varying the way we as consumers view these characters, we as people who are interacting with such characters view them.
Sorry to interrupt, Akriti. You have 2 more minutes to go.
Yes, sir, just concluding. In conclusion, narrative empathy is not merely a product of exposure to fiction, but it is significantly shaped by individual personality traits. While some traits they foster critical and pro-social empathy, others may facilitate moral disengagement. Our findings do have implications for understanding how media influences moral development and the psychological mechanisms of storytelling, and how, when you at a young age are exposed to such media, it could affect the way you view the world around us and you view yourself. Thank you, and my co-author and I, we are very appreciative of having this opportunity to present a paper that matters a lot to us as psychology students who study the subject. Thank you.
Thank you so much for keeping the time and being so elucidative about your topic. Now I will request Alankrita Jana to present her paper.
Yes, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Thank you. So, my name is Anunkita Jana and I am from Jhansi University. My topic for today is aesthetic resistance, how diaspora communities preserve cultural heritage through aesthetic practices in contemporary society through baul songs. So, however, first listening to this topic, the thing that comes into our mind, that what is this aesthetic resistance? So, aesthetic resistance, it has been coined from the works of theorists such as Jacques Rano and James E. Coates. Aesthetic resistance referred to the use of art and cultural expression to subtly oppose dominant ideologies rather than confrontational protest. It involves the everyday practices like music or performance that preserve marginalized identities and challenge the cultural hegemony. And my paper will explore this concept of aesthetic resistance as a means through which diaspora communities preserve, negotiate, and assert their cultural heritage within contemporary society, often hegemonic socio-political landscapes in a world where increasingly shaped by migration and globalization. These communities rely on their aesthetic expressions not merely for artistic fulfillment but as strategies of cultural resistance. This powerful form of aesthetic resistance is continued through the practice of baul songs among diaspora population. Whenever we hear of the baul songs, a thing that appears in our mind that baul songs is quite cultural or restricted to one place, but isn't actually this case. So before knowing this, we have to know who are actually this baul. Sociologically, baul, the definition of baul is widespread and given by different people in different ways, but I want to quote a particular definition that is given by Gyanendra Mohan Das in his Bengali Harshar Obhidan as mad, eccentric people, and they continued their song as their form of identity. Baul songs, not only a spiritual tradition of Bengal, function as a medium of cultural continuity and resistance in this diaspora. Rooted in the mystic traditions of Bengal, Baul music intervenes spiritual philosophy, poetic lyricism, and performative embodiment. The Baus traditionally entertain minstrels, reject the rigid social structures, embrace a syncretic worldview that challenges the religious orthodoxy beside their migration. For diaspora, particularly those of Bengali origin, Baul song serves as cultural anchors, linking them to a homeland both remembered and reimagined. Referring to Stuart Hall's notion that identity is not fixed but constructed. Through shared narratives and cultural practices, Baul music acts as a cultural marker which help in the communities to anchor themselves. So, if we consider, or if the question arises that whether these bowls are actually considered to be a diasporic community, according to the concept of Robert Cohen of cultural diasporic community or cultural diaspora, these bowls can be considered symbolically, as for bowls home is spiritual rather than territorial. It lies in the body, that is Dehotattva, and its concentration to the divine. This echoes diasporic redefinitions of home that are imagined and symbolic rather than geography. Through their marginality, nomadism, resistance, transculturalism, essence of diaspora as a space of cultural negotiation and spiritual border crossing. The Baul songs are a part of an oral tradition transmitted through Guru Shirsha Parampara. Even in diaspora, Bauls often form small satsang that are communities where living transmission continues, creating a feeling of brotherhood, unitedness. Alongside, they maintain a transgenerational memory which can only be shared within their community, both nationally and internationally. Through a multidisciplinary lens, drawing on the cultural studies, the line research examines how art and music has become everyday acts of resistance and identity making, with special reference to the bowl songs of Birhu. It challenged the dominant cultural paradigms. In diaspora settings, these songs subtly resist cultural erasure by combining elements of Sufism, Vaishnavism, and Tantric beliefs, characterized by simple instrument, profound lyrics, and rejection of the rigid pre-notion. It is institutional practices in diaspora. These values take on a renewed significance as this makes the songs culturally portable, resonating with diverse audiences even outside the Bengal. Though their lyrical depth and emotive performance, they articulate a cultural worldview that values interconnectedness and spiritual pursuit over assimilation. Even in diaspora context, the songs have migrated with people, evolving while retaining in their philosophical sense. Even as Baul culture has become so popular in communities such as UK, US, Gulf countries, to help to perform, this diaspora reconnect with their homeland's philosophy and values, performing or listening to the music of emotional and cultural anchor. However, now going deep down into the theme of this bowl song, whenever we hear or we study that this theme of the bowl songs are marked with the use of certain suggestive words in composition, marking my words, the songs are thematically or indicatively based on the concepts of Moner Manush, that is man over heart, Adhar Manush, uncatchable man, Pakhi, Ghor Mukam, Orshinogo, that is the city of mirror, and Hawa. This Hawa can be both philosophically and metaphorically re-challenges their beliefs, their breathlessness over everything. Their river, chant, the music characterized by their simplicity and depth, reflects an amalgamation and upholding of marginal countercultural values. The increasing popularity of Baul music in mainstream culture has also led to concerns about cultural modification and the dilution in a spiritual essence. Bowls are religious boundaries, emphasizing the unity of all human beings. Their songs and their teachings often focus on themes of love, devotion, poise, and for the divine within their oneself. They have some regional or local identity manifested through sampradaya as well as universal principles of esoteric practice and humanism. The Baul songs are now a part of the popular culture of Bengal, have large scale digitization and wide exposure of the Bauls in the country, and abroad had triggered a cultural industry. However, in Baul songs, we can always see that though they are performed on larger scale, they sometimes use certain coded language, which we call Shandhu Bhasha, which actually is symbolic, metamorphical, to protect their heritage, to protect their poetic structure. I want to quote Arjun Abudai's Ethnoscape and Mediascape, which is quite relevant here, as technology has further enabled the Baul music role in cultural preservation, even with the very famous Lalon Fokis, that is events that are held outside Bengal, provides platform to Baul to represent their culture both globally and on transnational platforms. Diaspora Performs now shares songs on digital platforms, expanding their reach, allowing the transnational community engagement. The blending of this tradition with modern tools exemplifies how diaspora communities adapt creatively while maintaining cultural roots. Performances being preserved through ritual. Their music is always tied to their original or of origin, costume, dance, and instruments like aktara, homo, and doggi, which are symbols of visual markers of authenticity, maintaining their aesthetic continuity in every film. However, the ektara, why does, if the question arises that why only ektara, doggi, this type of instruments are used by bowls, the question, the ektara is not, it's not really a symbol of Baul simplicity may now accompany the digital beats or performed in global venues, yet their physical essence remains intact through the closeness of these instruments with their songs. Now, I want to conclude my paper by saying that Baul songs exemplify the power of music as a vehicle for sociocultural continuity in diaspora. Through aesthetic resistance, diaspora communities negotiate their identity, assert their presence, preserve their culture and heritage. This case headlights the broader sociological insight that cultural traditions, when practiced and adapted, become dynamic forms of resistance and resilience even in modern societies. Beside being an art form, it continues to serve a profound mood of cultural and spiritual resistance, reminding us true liberation lies in the soul of every human being. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Now I will request Rekha M to present her paper.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon to all. I will be reading Power into the novel The Blue Between Sky and Water by Susan Abul Hawa, an American Palestinian novelist. But before I go into the analysis, I would like to introduce the concept of necropolitics. Necros in Greek means death, and necropolitics is a concept developed by the Cameroonian philosopher Akhil Bembe in 2003. It means the subjugation of a population by a sovereign power using the death or the fear of death, and the sovereign power uses necro power, or the power of, to put people to death in order to control or manage the population. Necropolitics is actually an offshoot of Foucault's biopolitics, but whereas Foucault discusses only about management of life, calculated management of life in Western countries, Bembe wants to extend it, that concept, how the population is managed in areas like colonies, slave plantations, or concentration camps. Now, the even modern democracies indulge in necropolitics, where the ultimate expression of sovereign power is to decide who gets to live and who should die, and the population is segregated accordingly. Usually, the minorities are put in the unwanted groups. And they become the other, or there is this fictionalized notion of the enemy. The enemy has to be hated, the enemy is perceived as a mortal threat, and it necessitates the elimination of the enemy. And here racism plays a very crucial role in creating the notion of the enemy. And we have to remember that this enemy, or the minorities or the unwanted people, they do not enjoy rights or privileges of the ordinary citizen. Now, there are certain concepts that are crucial in understanding how necropolitics operates. These are terms like state of exception, state of siege, bare life, homo sacer. Now, state of exception, it's a concept introduced by Carl Schmitt. It refers to a zone which operates outside the law, where constitutional rights are suspended and movement is restricted. One example of such a zone is the concentration camp during the Holocaust or the slave plantations in America. The state of siege is another term. It is a siege situation where the political state features extreme repression, emergency measures, and suspension of rights and freedom. Now, what about the people who live in such a space or condition? And now, bare life is another term explained by Giorgio Agamben. And bare life is neither Zoe. Zoe means natural life. No, bios means political life, but it is a condition where the individual is stripped of rights and privileges but continues to exist. Another term that becomes relevant here is homo sacer, again explained by Agamben. Homo sacer is a sacred man who is excluded from the city by the sovereign and is so worthless that it is legal to kill a homo sacer. And such an enemy will be confined to zones which Bembe calls death worlds, and they will exist as the living dead. Now, death worlds in modern in contemporary parlance, we can define death worlds, or examples of death worlds are the areas under military occupation, police surveillance, the prison or refugee camps where people have no recourse to legal rights. And the sovereign power uses a number of a conflation of reason in the form of propaganda, terror, and new technologies of destruction. We know of drones and what happened in Pahalgam after in Operation Sindoor. So new technologies of destruction are made use of to create this situation. And modern these people who are in these zones, they are usually displaced from their homes. They are relegated into places where violence is unleashed, terror and death, or they are subject to terror and death. And these political spaces also are made into enclave economies where resources are forcibly extracted to finance war. And we have to remember that modern war is not just the monopoly of a nation state. It's not just the army of a country, that indulges, but there are war machines. This is explained by Guttari and Deleuze. They kill, people with the sanction of the state. And the global mobility helps in this. Now, and for those people living in such political spaces, living is a condition of being in pain, of existing in terror and oppression. And under such circumstances, death becomes a means of redemption from terror and bondage. And there is a preference for death. And this preference for death actually gives the subject agency, because death becomes the space where freedom and negation operate. And that is why many people are willing to become suicide bombers and martyrs for the cause of freedom. Now, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is well known too well known to be explained here. I just suffice it to say that the Palestinians, with their lands seized Many of them are forced to live in refugee camps. They're stripped of their rights. Palestine itself becomes a series of colonies, and these colonies becomes the zones of exception, where draconian restrictions are imposed. The economy is starved, movement is restricted, and the Palestinians live in a permanent state of exception, leading bare lives. And there is this cycle, endless cycle of attacks by Israel and counterattacks by the Palestinians, and that is why these colonies become death worlds. And there is also unfair imprisonment, destruction of homes, roads, water sources by Israeli army, that make their living condition quite terrible. Now I'm moving on to the novel, The Blue Between Sky and Water, written in 2000, published in 2015 by Susan Abulhava, which portrays 7 decades of the Israeli-Palestine conflict by focusing on the refugees of the village of Beit Daras, especially focusing on the Baraka family, 3 generations of the Baraka family. The novel begins when the villagers are forced to leave Gaza, when they can no longer hold back Zionist soldiers from occupying the village, and they hope to return when it is safer. But they can never return, and they start life in refugee camps, and their identity, their life and identity is reduced to ration books, queues, and different colored passes to show at checkposts. And these zones of exception become their permanent dwelling, where there is constantly this terror and fear of death. The Palestinians are unfairly, the characters are unfairly detained and then the Israeli soldiers ransack and loot the homes of the Palestinians. The women are raped, the land is burnt, and the people are indiscriminately killed. And that sort of life becomes the normal mode for the Palestinian people, and that is why these people live in a permanent state of exception, leading bare lives, and like homo sackers. And there's some characters, examples of some instances of necro power in this particular novel. Amdaw is the head of the matriarch of the Baraka family. She's killed while trying to rescue her wounded son, who's shot in the leg by the Israeli soldier. Her eldest daughter Nazmi is raped by 7 or 8 Israeli soldiers while she tries to escape with her sister. And her younger sister Maria is shot in the head by Israeli soldier, while another soldier rapes Nazmi. And Nazmi's oldest son, who's a product of the rape, he understands the trauma of his mother, and he becomes a resistant fighter, for which he is arrested and is sentenced to life. One of the most poignant, or horrendous example, illustration of necro power is when Israel drops phosphorus bombs on the people of this camp, and the people, including little children, combust into flames, and they run here and there. Even when the Palestinians indulge in harmless activities like having picnics on the beach or fishing in the sea, they are attacked by the Israeli soldiers. Even foreigners who help are sometimes come under the fire of Israeli guns. An example is Rachel Carey, an American volunteer. The novelist points out how the Jewish children are indoctrinated into hating the Palestinians. There's an instance where Jewish mothers ask their children to throw stones at the passing Palestinian people. And so much killing happens in Gaza that one of the characters comments that it is a rare blessing to die naturally. Now, coming to the crux of my paper, how culture, helps the people to be resilient, to be optimistic in the face of necro power. And it is the people resist politically and also socially and culturally, and it is the resilience of the people that help them to recoup after each disaster. Their harmony, their determination to persist living, come what may, helps them to continue life. For example, an example of their resilience is when Israel stops, their movement, blocks their roads and food supply, the people build tunnels to smuggle essential things like medicine and food, and also to move from place to place. And one striking aspect is their determination to celebrate each little, victory or joyous occasion, like marriages or births, and the community gathers together. Each time, their houses, their schools, the mosque is demolished, they recoup and rebuild homes, schools, and mosques. And the no, and it's we have to remember how the notions of honor and hospitality are very strong in these people. Also, they are anchored by their belief in God, and this coming together of the sense of community helps them to bond together and survive tragedies and grief. The females, especially of the novel, are pretty, resilient, strong, and very practical. The older generation is illiterate, but they bind the community together with their wisdom, their knowledge, and their love. For example, after they become refugees, the women acclimatize to their new life in their makeshift dwellings, gathering together to wash laundry, gossip, and cook bread in the community kitchens and ovens built by the men, settling into, I quote, a subculture marked by adamant pride, defiance, and an unwavering insistence on the dignity of home, unquote. And Nazmiye, with her strength, her wisdom, her anger at the enemy, she is a rape victim. She manages to bind together not only her large family but also the community. Even though she is repeatedly visited by tragedies, she is one of the strongest characters in the book. There is another character, the beekeeper's widow. She doesn't have a name. She has a knowledge of herbal medicine. And she helps people recover from their ailments. She also helps Nazmia's daughter, who gets breast cancer. She helps by giving herbal medicines. She helps the tumor to reduce in size. So that is why I mentioned the traditional wisdom, the herbal medicinal knowledge of the people, how they use it to help each other. There is Noor, Nazmia's grandniece, an American citizen. She's a psychiatrist. She chooses to live in this conflict-ridden Palestine with her grandfather's family to help the people who suffer from trauma. So these are some of the strong female characters in the novel. And the most interesting aspect of the novel, it's the cultural beliefs of the people and the elements of magical realism that is incorporated. For example, Mamdao, the matriarch of the Baraka family, she's possessed by a jinn, Sulaiman, and she has the ability to prophesy. And it is she who foretells the villagers of the calamity that will strike them. And she who predicts that, enemies will come and destroy them and scatter them. And it is her words, her prediction that this land will rise again, that fuels, their lives with hope. And her companion Sulaiman virtually, or really comes to protect, these people when they are attacked by when these people are attacked by Israeli soldiers. These soldiers, they start burning because of the curse by Sulaiman. Then Mariam, Mamdau's daughter, has different colored eyes, and she can see auras given by people, and she can predict their behavior. Ironically, Mariam says white is the most malicious color and black is pure. Whether this is a reference to the European Jews, and Britain and America, who caused all this, tragedy upon Palestine, that is to be interpreted. And then Khalid, one of is the most important character in the book. He's the protagonist. He's the narrator also, one of the narrators. He can travel in time and space in his mind. And it is Khalid who travels back in time and teaches the 10-year-old Mariam how to read and write. And Mariam and Khalid...
sorry to interrupt, Rekha ma'am. You have 2 more minutes.
Yeah, I'll conclude within 2 minutes. So, this parallel world, I'm concluding, these parallel world, these beliefs rooted in culture, about a peaceful bait there is where Khalid, Mariam, etc. live, the hope that the jinn Sulaiman will help, and Khalid's ability to time travel, these actually can be in Membe's, Akil Membe's theoretical framework, they can be interpreted as forms of cultural resistance. A symbolic power is accorded to the world inhabited by the supernatural and the spirits of the dead. And here, in such a world, the colonial power can be challenged or made ineffective. The parallel world of Beit there is where Khalid, Mariam, all dead people. Khalid also dies later, and they go to exist in this parallel universe. That is a place where necro power or necropolitics cannot, function. Uh, these beliefs in the jinn in a parallel universe, these beliefs revitalizes the oppressed people of Palestine, and it provides a rationale for resistance. These beliefs can be schemes of thought or forms of rationality that help them to recoup. And in conclusion, I would say that culture and cultural beliefs propel these suffering souls of Palestine to strive to hold themselves together and fight back, illustrating the indomitability of the human spirit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the deliberation. I would request the next presenter to come and present the paper.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Meera Jacob Ilamada. I'm a research scholar from Garden City University, Bangalore, and I will be presenting on gender fluid performances across Indian narratives as well as Western narratives. So I'm just going to share my screen now. Yeah, I hope my screen is visible to everyone.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. In this particular conference, especially on the heels of Dr. Noak's very wonderful keynote address, addressing the very vital need of having conversations across cultures, so that humanity itself is not lost, our humanness is not lost. I do believe that I would like to contribute something to that. In particular, I would like to discuss how gender is perceived and how it is performed across various cultures, in particular in Indian society and in Western narratives. So some of the questions that I would like to that I'm exploring in this particular paper is, how is the gender performance conceptualized in Indian and Western cultural traditions? Traditionally, how we see gender, and in popular culture, how is gender being presented? And I would also like to explore this concept on the basis of Judith Butler's theory of gender performativity. And also, I would like to touch upon how audiences, ordinary people perceive gender performativity, or how open are they to gender fluid performances. So gender performativity, when it comes to Indian narratives, we have a huge mythological framework or cultural framework of gender fluid performances. In particular, in our Indian Hindu mythology, we have the gender metamorphosis of Lord Shiva and his and Goddess Parvati as Ardhanarishwara. Then we have from the Mahabharata Arjuna's transition into Brihannala during the Ajnadavas period of their exile. And of course, we have the very famous Lord Vishnu's avatar as Mohini, the enchantress. These are just a few examples of gender fluid performances, or rather when one gender is being shifted into another gender and it is accepted in society, and it is accepted as part, or it is accepted as normal. And in fact, it is very interesting to note that in Sanskrit there are over 50 different terms that are used to represent this third sex or queerness, or Tritiya Prakriti as it was called formerly in those days. Now, these are just some representations. We have Ardhanarishwara, we have Arjuna as Brihanala, and we have the Lord Vishnu as Mohini. All these are actually fluid performances. Like it is not either uh, a male gender that is being performed, or it is not female. It is like one is being shifted to other, and this was part of our culture. It is still part of our culture and our traditions. We also, if you look at our folk traditions in India, we have several folk dances, especially like as shown here. The first one is Teyyam. The second one is of Kathakali, and the last one is of Yakshagana. All these folk traditions or folk dance forms have gender fluid performances. We have male performers performing the part of females, or these days we even have female performers coming onto the stage and taking up male parts. So here also the story that these folk dances or folk traditions try to portray is also a gender fluid performance. They are not sticking on to any normal kind of a gender, but rather it's like a fluid performance, and all this is considered as very normal or natural in our society even today. Now, when you look at Western narratives or in Western mythology, also we have such gender fluid performances or gender fluid characters. We have, interestingly, the character of Loki from Norse mythology, who is known to be able to shapeshift. He sometimes appears as a male, sometimes he appears as a female. Similarly, in Greek mythology, we have Hermaphroditus, who is supposed to be the son of the goddess of love Aphrodite and Hermes, and he is also believed to have two genders, both male and female characteristics. Then we have the Greek philosopher Tiresias, who was cursed actually into a woman for 7 years. He was cursed into the body of a woman and has lived as a woman for 7 years. And in other ancient literature, specifically in Ovid's Metamorphoses also, we come across characters with fluid genders. This is in short to show that the ancient people, either from India or from West, was not really, or rather was more accepting of the fact that gender is not stable or gender is not a fixed entity, rather it changes, or rather it can be fluid. This was an accepted norm in ancient times. Now I would like to explore the concept of gender as performative as put forth by Judith Butler to analyze this further. Butler says that gender is not something that one is, but it is something that one does, which implies that gender is actually something that we do, something that we act out. And specifically to quote Butler, she says gender is a stylized repetition of acts through time. All this is the highlighted words here are all key. It is a stylized repetition. Stylized in the sense stylized maybe by social norms, by family peer pressure or anything, and it is repeated, and it is repeated through time. This is why Butler calls gender as performative, and it is not a performance. It is performative in the sense that it implies that there is a social expectation that a person is trying to meet as he is performing his gender or her gender. So as you can see in the picture, boy children are often given toys like trucks. They are encouraged to engage in very rough kind of play, like maybe climbing trees, whereas girls are expected to sit quietly, maybe play with dolls, or maybe just play at a kitchen environment, something like that. So this creates a cultural consciousness in the child's mind that a boy is supposed to play rough, whereas a girl is supposed to sit quietly, decorously, and just play with dolls, or mostly do feminine things. Again, feminine I would emphasize, because it's again a question for us: what makes anything feminine or masculine? So this is how we kind of uh, we kind of project our social expectation that a person is supposed to conform to a particular stereotyped way of gender that may or may not be what he really feels. So this is what Butler tries to get into especially in her book, The Gender Trouble. A similar point is put forth by another theorist, Simone de Beauvoir, in her the second sex. She says that one is not born but rather becomes a woman. This also implies that there are certain interactions, maybe social interactions or expectations of society, expectations of family, that a woman conforms to and therefore becomes a woman. For example, in the pictures that I've shown here, we often think when we say a woman or a mother, we associate a mother as somebody who cooks food, somebody who looks after the children, who plays with children, who does the simple chores around the house. These days, while this is not all that is the role of a woman, women are also going out in society and working, and working in a very professional environment. However, as soon as they come back home, once they are back in the home environment, these roles, the roles that are portrayed here, are immediately imposed on their shoulders again. A working woman, and I do say working to emphasize that she goes out of the house to work, not that a homemaker is not working. A working woman, when she comes back home, she is expected to carry on the duties that are traditionally expected of women. And whereas in the case of a man, if he is stepping out of the house to go and work and he returns home, no other additional responsibilities are usually placed on his shoulders. Now, I am very happy to say that these things are actually changing nowadays in our society, but still, in most parts of the world, even in India, becoming woman, or the stereotypical woman, is very much an inherent part of society despite all these talks and changes. So, yeah. Next, I would like to talk about gender performativity as it appears in popular culture. Now, these are two examples that I have given here from the West. The figure on the left shows a gay drag queen culture or drag culture, where people dress up as a different gender, dress up in different genders. Specifically, they go to, extreme stereotypes of such genders. For example, you can see that all the women portrayed there are heavily made up with very loud costumes and things like that. So, but in reality, all these people are actually male people and they are not female. So this is a drag culture. This was a way to, question the status quo, question the stereotyping of genders that was present in Western society, and it is still very much a part of the counterculture movements that are very relevant in Western society even today. On the right, we have pop culture figure David Bowie. He was a famous musician and pop culture artist, and he was one of the pioneers who, uh, challenged the stereotyping of gender, and purposefully dressed himself up in gender fluid clothes, or gave gender fluid performances, forcing his audience to question what they understand by terms masculinity or femininity. When it comes to gender performativity in popular culture today, more recent times, I have given two clippings. One is of the very famous Barbie live action remake of the movie that was released recently. And on the right, we have a clipping from the famous movie Pushpa 2 that was released recently. Both these movies, especially in the movie Barbie, it portrays an environment that is matriarchal in nature, where more power is given to the female character. But even there, even in such a society, we see stereotyping. There are there are certain roles to which each of these so-called empowered females are expected to conform to. For example, you have stereotypical Barbie, who is not expected to question anything and is supposed to be a stereotypical woman. Then we have weird Barbie, who is supposed to question each and everything. She is the one who is supposed to do all the weird things. So, like that, we see even in this so-called empowered, women empowered world, we see a kind of stereotyping that is happening based on one's gender. Now, on the other hand, Allu Arjun's performance in Pushpa 2, especially in this scene, was really it really made me sit up and watch again, because here you have a character who and the whole movie is built around this character's overt masculinity, and that is somehow portrayed as being a very heroic attribute. We have such a overtly masculine character coming in as dressed as a drop-dead gorgeous goddess in all female avatar, with the full sari, the makeup, the jewelry, and everything, and giving a really mind-blowing performance. And it really causes the audience, the viewer, to question what they have understood by the meaning masculinity and femininity, seeing this performance. It really makes us question, is it really the attire, or is it really the way we walk or the way we talk? What defines gender? We start to question all these stereotypes ourselves. So it is my sincere belief that both these movies are stellar examples of making the wide world audience, the common man, sit up and reevaluate his gender stereotypes. Now, when it comes to audience reception, how do the ordinary man take all these kind of performances? I would say that
Meera,
yes,
sorry to interrupt you. Could you try to wrap it up in a minute?
yes, I'm done. I'm done. Yes, one
Thank you.
moment. Yeah, thank you. Yes. So as I was saying, when it comes to audience acceptance, in Indian culture, we see that when gender fluid performances are put up, especially in the background of a religious festival or maybe a cultural practice like a folk dance or something, it is accepted. However, when it comes to ordinary everyday it is still looked upon, it is still questioned, and it is so or bureaucratic case when it comes to Western society as well. So a quick comparative analysis, we see that in the Indian context, we have gender fluid performances or gender fluid narratives beginning or originating in folklore or mythology, whereas in the West, it has often come up as a kind of a countercultural movement. However, in both cases, the acceptance of this gender fluidity or questioning of the stereotyping of gender is always a question mark. It is still being faced with a lot of resistance from the common people. We hope that with movies like Barbie and performances like the one in Pushpa 2, we can further push through the resistance barrier, and we can cause more of acceptance, more of gender fluid can be considered as the norm as opposed to a gender stereotype. So thank you very much, and this is my idea in a nutshell. Thank you.
Thank you, Meera, for that engaging presentation. The next presenter is Devika Panikar. So I would right away like to ask Devika to present.
Hello, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So shall I start my presentation?
Yes, sure.
So let me share my presentation.
Please look out at the chat session. I will let you know how much time you have left in there.
Is it visible, ma'am, my presentation?
Yes, the screen is blank.
Screen is blank. Okay, just a minute.
Yes, it's
visible. Okay.
Yes,
it's visible. Okay. Means of control, language, and thought in Orwell's illustrated dystopia. Now, my paper will be analyzing the graphic novel adaptation of George Orwell's 1984 through visualizing the theme of linguistic and cognitive control mechanisms. The paper analyzes 10 main thematic frames, such as the newspeak visualization, censorship as art, surveillance depiction, isolation through thought, graphic reinforcement, reality destruction, contradiction in imagery, facial expressions and body language, muted language and culture, and color and typography as expression. The themes of changing language and controlling thoughts, which are vital in 1984, stand out in Fido Nesti's graphic novel through the clever integration of pictures and text. He makes Orwell's big ideas temporary and gives his thoughts the ability to confront readers visually and mentally. The matter of language and mental dominance is central to Orwell's 1984, and it is depicted with great clarity and impact in Fido Nesti's version of the story. Orwell, in Winston Smith's life, the main character in the novel, in the graphic novel, in his life, Big Brother and the television keep invading his most personal moments. We can see that Winston is beginning to question the party because his surroundings, expressions, and diary entries become lighter and less controlled. However, these fleeting moments usually disappear when we realize that our privacy is under constant threat and we know we can be reprogrammed. Mixing pictures and text well, the graphic novel version of 1984 brings to light exactly how Orwell's words shaped the character's mind. It demonstrated that the control of language served a political purpose and had an impact on people's perceptions. By lowering the amount of language, the party lessens people's way of thinking, and by manipulating minds, it gets rid of any criticism. Therefore, putting down disagreement allows them to control everything about thought and mind. With a frightening logic, this book makes Orwell's message unforgettable, exposing readers to his fears. So throughout the book, the bold posters containing phrases like "Big Brother is watching you" are everywhere, much like how newspeak is used to control people's thinking. The words are printed in large and intense letters so that the full meaning is clear and cannot be taken, just as the language is for. And thanks to Nesti's illustrations, we see the posters in different locations, creating a close and suffocating atmosphere in which language becomes a simple way to manage rather than to communicate. Coming to the theoretical framework, Roland Barthes' theory of semiotics allows a clear look at the way Fido Nesti's graphic novel uses imagery to interpret 1984 by George Orwell. For Barthes, pictures and language use a system of signs that contain both basic and culturally significant meanings. In a totalitarian setting like Orwell's Oceania, the graphic novel medium multiplies these signifying layers, rendering state control not just as a theme, but as a living, perceptible semiotic environment. Moving on to the second theories, according to MacLeod, the use of visual style as an extension of psychological interiority exemplifies the subjective motion of comics where time and thought are represented spatially. This form allows readers to dwell in Winston's hesitation, his flickers of doubt and rebellion, with a nuance that prose alone would render more abstract. Moving to the third theorist, Susan Sontag's. Sontag's ideas most powerfully intersect with the graphic novel in the notion of silence of the image, how pictures often refuse explanation even as they demand attention. Nesti capitalizes on this in scenes where language fails, Winston's emotional disintegration as an example. These are not elaborated in text, they are shown, often with restrained minimalistic drawings. In such moments, the panel becomes a visual still, echoing Sontag's ideas of the photograph as a moment ripped from time. This silence, this suspension is central to Orwell's dystopia, where language is perverted and meaning must be gleaned through gesture, color, and gaze. And the graphic novel, in allowing the image to speak alone, captures what prose must describe. In the graphic version of 1984 by Fido Nesti, newspeak is represented as something that appears in every part of life and affects the way the society thinks. In the story, people explain why the language is needed, but it is Nesti's drawings that convey its effects on their bodies and minds. readers are informed about newspeak, then they watch it as it starts to affect all parts of Oceania, including the physical world and people's thoughts. Surveillance is a constant and oppressive presence throughout the graphic novel. Telescreens, a symbol of parties' unblinking watchfulness, frequently appear with glowing, almost sentinel eyes, suggesting a presence that not only sees but judges. These telescreens are often positioned in the background, quietly asserting their control, while the image of Big Brother dominates posters and walls. His stern, omnipresent gaze follows the characters and the reader through nearly every page. Doublethink. In the graphic novel adaptation of 1984, the concept of doublethink, the ability to hold two contradictory beliefs simultaneously and accept both as true, is rendered not only through dialogue but through powerful visual irony that starkly highlights the absurdity and horror of such mental manipulation. Fidonesti's illustrations expose the grotesque contradictions at the heart of parties' control by juxtaposing serene or noble-sounding institutions with disturbing, violent imagery. This dissonance between appearance and reality is rendered with striking visual metaphors that deepen the novel's impact and immerse the reader in the surreal, oppressive world of Oceania. The visual style of Fidonesti's graphic novel adaptation of 1984 is more than an aesthetic choice. It is an extension of the story's psychological and ideological landscape. The muted color palette, dominated by grays, browns, and washed-out tones, create a visual atmosphere of stagnation and emotional suppression. This visual dullness mirrors the effects of newspeak, the party's deliberately limited language, which drains communication of nuance and feeling. Just as newspeak narrows the range of thought, the subdued visuals compress the emotional space, leaving the reader enveloped in a world that feels both colorless and suffocating. Typography is also seen with precision and purpose throughout the graphic novel, functioning as a form of visual language that reinforces the party's control. Official party slogans are rendered in bold, blocky typefaces that are devoid of personality or warmth. And these texts feel as if they are carved into panels themselves, immutable, final, and beyond question. Their uniformity strips them of any human authorship, positioning them as unchallengeable truths issued by an omnipotent force. In contrast, when Winston writes in his secret diary, the typography shifts noticeably. His handwriting is depicted in a looser, more personal cursive font, surrounded by panels that feel more organic and less geometrically structured. These moments provide a rare visual intimacy in the otherwise rigid aesthetic of the novel. The softer, slanting lettering of his thoughts suggests vulnerability, individuality, and emotional depth, qualities that the party seeks to erase. This typography visually cues the reader into Winston's internal resistance, highlighting the danger and humanity of writing down one's thoughts. The typography accompanying Big Brother's image is consistent and monumental, clean, bold, always in uppercase, and unchanging. Whether it appears on posters, coins, or telescreen captions, the font remains identical. This typographic consistency enforces the myth of Big Brother's omnipresence and eternal truth. In contrast, when Winston and Julia converse in secret or express forbidden feelings, their words are lettered in a more flexible, handwritten, or slightly italicized fonts. These subtle visual contrasts communicate that truth and intimacy exist only in fleeting, fragile spaces. In Fido Nesti's graphic novel adaptation of 1984, the manipulation of language and thought is not confined to the written word, it is deeply embedded in the visual fabric of the story. Orwell's original novel is known for its dense intellectual exploration of how totalitarian regimes weaponize language to dominate the minds of individuals. Nesty takes these abstract, often philosophical ideas and translate them into images that evoke an immediate visceral reaction. In doing so, the adaptation does more than depict a dystopian world, it immerses the reader in the psychological architecture of oppression, where every corner, face, and word serves a function in the machinery of control.
Sorry to interrupt, Devika. Please try to wind up your material.
Okay, yes. So, what makes this adaptation so effective is its ability to show that language in the world of 1984 is no longer a vehicle for truth or individuality. It is a weapon, a tool of erasure and reconstruction. In this way, the adaptation does not merely retell Orwell's story, it amplifies its urgency, allowing the reader to experience in full sensory detail the devastating cost of losing control over language and thought. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you also for being on time.
Thank you.
I think because we don't have a lot of time, I would like to call our next presenter. Our next presenter is Dr. Madhurima Narkes. So I'm giving you the stage to present your paper.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen.
Sure.
Is it visible? The slides, is it visible to you?
It's not visible. I think you have not shared it yet.
Check. It's starting.
Okay.
Just a second.
Sure.
Okay, so for some reasons it's still saying that it is starting, but it has not started sharing the screen. Just a second. Let me check. Just leave and join again, then I think it will
Okay, sure.
Okay. Is it working now?
Yes, we can see yours.
Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, so I am Dr. Madhurima Narkes, and a very good afternoon to all of you. So my paper is titled as Decoding Visual Discourse, a critical study of storytelling techniques in long form, an anthology of graphic narratives. So before I start, I would like to quote Edward Said, where he said, "Comics in their relentless foregrounding seem to say what otherwise couldn't be said, perhaps what wasn't permitted to be said or imagined." So keeping this in mind, I would be sharing my slides from now onwards based on this. So we all know that from its beginning, the canonically privileged bastions of literacy obstructed comics from evolving as a genre, weaving the potential of forming knowledge and producing a discourse. So as popularly accepted, we know that Gothic is a genre, satire is a genre, periodical is also a genre, through their claims to expertise of a set of knowledge. On the contrary, comics is a self-dependent discursive medium in its own right, and it can mold itself to represent anything it wants through its verbal and visual dynamics. So the objectives of my paper, as you can see in this slide, so the paper tries to understand how comics as a medium resists the repressing of powerful discourses, treating it as fantasy literature suitable for children and teens. This paper also hopes to discover the layers of othering this medium confronts while looking for ways to raise voice against the jingoist mainstream media. And also as a counter discourse, comics promotes unheard stories of equally nameless people forcibly wiped out from world history. And last but not the least, it is trying to question the majoritarian notion of constructing knowledge through reading and writing, because through this visual and verbal dynamics, comics has so much more to offer. Let's move on to the next slide. So my first graphic story is Bittersweet by Ekta Bharati, and as you can see, the binary opposition in the title itself, it offers a space for resistance. So in this story, it is about a couple who are currently not very happy, or not sharing a very happy bonding, and they have lots of complaints about each other. Especially the man here, as you can see in this slide, there is a man and a woman. He is not happy with the woman here because of her unsatiable sexual desire. And as you can also see in this slide, he has raised this issue saying that, do you even know what true love is? It is unconditional giving, and he wants so much in return. So he's not happy with the woman's unsatiable desire, or her desire, as a matter of fact. And this is also, it also talks about the pressure, the societal pressure of the woman here to remain inferior to the man by suppressing her sexual desire. So inferiority as a term, we can see that it is always associated with the feminine. And as Helen Sixu in her essay Sorties has questioned, where is she? So this is very important in this story also, that where is she, how the woman will claim her story to be her own. Because as in the first panel we can see, the woman has been tried, the whole discourse is trying to remove her, erase her from the panels as well, and she is nowhere there. They are trying to suppress her towards the periphery. So so where is she? So this is a question that we must be asking. And in the next slide, so we can say that the women's exclusion also talks about or signals at the phallocentric discourse, where a woman should neither have her sexual desires, even if she does have it, she has to suppress it. She has to suppress her female identity, and also her self-expression. So, but what the woman here is doing, she is reclaiming her agency by showing herself even more. So she is reclaiming the panel also, because here what the man was trying to do, he has failed to achieve it, because we see again some pictures of lips are there, and we also see some devilish teeth of the woman, and she is definitely has been compared with the biblical Eve. But instead of the apple here, we have a rotten or decayed strawberry. If I zoom, you can see it. So it talks about it is symptomatic of her sexual desire. So the woman here is like reclaiming her own her own space by being there even more. So this panel is offering her a space, and also the writers and the character also to have a discourse of their own by resisting the phallocentric gaze. Is there a message for me? I have to go back and check it. I hope not. So here this space, this graphic space becomes graphic literature, which is celebrating the woman's movement, and she is moving, she is floating throughout the panel, and there is no fixed frames and gutters, nothing is there for her. She is reclaiming the whole panel as her home. So this is how she is creating a graphic literature. The writer also and the audiences are also seeing how the woman is making herself more seen and more heard. So this is what I have prepared from the story called The Bittersweet. Let's move on to the next slide. So this is another story by Shuman Choudhury. It is Storm Over a Teacup. So what is happening in this story is it is very interesting because there is not a single text. Everything you have to decode. The audience or the reader, they have to understand whatever is happening inside the text. So this is just a tea shop, a regular tea shop, Bengali tea shop maybe, or where some middle-aged men who are inside the shop, and what they are doing here, they are surveilling the outside world. So what Michel Foucault has shown us or has talked about, that the surveillance there was happening from outside to the insiders, but here the insiders from a tea shop, they are judging the people who are there on the street. So here comics or the entire space is seen as a third space where these hybridized identities are evolving. Now I would like to talk about the next slide where the main incidents are happening. If you can notice carefully, so in the panels you will see some people are there inside the tea shop, and look at their teeth, and look how they are, look at their eyes also, and look how they are talking. Everything is so exaggerated. It talks about how they are gazing the people who are outside, but very interestingly, they are also being gazed at by whom? By the readers, by the audiences. So the concept of surveillance or panopticism, it's not no longer one dimensional. It is happening from both the sides. And so what is outside the frame and what is also inside it. Now, why are there so many eyes, and why the teeth are so crooked? Because maybe because of their mentality on how they what they are doing to the people who are standing outside, and why are they looking like this. I'll just explain it in the next slide. So I have just mentioned that they are surveilling the outside world. So this is the outside world. What is happening outside? Look at this auto rickshaw driver. Again, he has multiple eyes, and look how he is ogling at the woman's body, and it is signaling that a woman's, and the woman's face is also not visible, only her body, signaling the fact that she is an object of commodity. And that is why the auto rickshaw driver, the way he is looking at her. And also in the next slide, there is a group of men, and maybe they are going for some political party rallies, and they are blindfolded. Now why? Because maybe they don't really pay attention to what the political parties stand for. They are merely there because maybe they are paid, or maybe they are brainwashed, and that is why they are blindfolded. So these people are being seen by the people who are there inside the tea shop. But what they are doing while they are watching a woman being ogled by an auto rickshaw driver, do they do anything? No. Life goes on. So this is all about the story of a storm over a teacup. So they are discussing, they are judging people, but nothing happens, nothing ever happens, except these things which we see every day happening to every woman, or these are common things. So now let's move on to the next story, another beautiful story.
Madhurima, just wanted to remind you, you have 5 more minutes.
Okay, I'll finish. This is my last slide and I'll finish. So this is another story by Rai. It is Pushkar, and it talks about the celebration of Holi and how sometimes it can be very violent for some people. So Pushkar is a story. It is very interesting. This story is very interesting because the narrator does not disclose her sexual identity at the very beginning, and also we don't get to know her name. So let alone her, we also don't get to know her caste. So the Pushkar is actually here a hotel, a place of accommodation, a lodge, where the narrator was trying to get a place, but there is a disclaimer that only the Brahmins can have a place in a hotel called Pushkar. So this is basically the story is about that. But what is interesting is when the Holi was happening, the narrator here, who looks like a little boy, was not recognized by the faceless mob to be a woman, and she was there inside this frenzied mob who were playing Holi and dancing to loud music, and nobody was paying attention whether a woman was being harmed or whether people are breathing. So she was just trying to survive in that frenzied mob, and she barely survived. So what does it talk about? So Rai's art shows a mob, not a community, and joy, and she also shows how joy gives way to menace. So if we see the story, it also we can see that it lacks idealism, leaning into ambivalence and menace of mass festivity. So graphic storytelling captures both spectacle and social discomfort. If you notice the panel, you will see that this man who was trying to put the pharo of the narrator, because that is how the holy tradition works, he comes to not know that the narrator is actually a girl, and then he says the pata hi nahi chalta hai ma'am, because this is where I have tried to talk about marginalization beneath the color and how caste violence everything, how Rai has tried to show that in this graphic tale. So thank you for listening. So this is it.
Thank you so much, Nargis. That was really an amazing presentation. So our next presenter is Dr. Kirti Prakash Sangole. Is Kirti present here? Just want to ask again if Kirti is present here or not. Okay, if Kirti is not present here, maybe we could move on to the other presenter, if that's okay. The next presenter is Punnu Liz Malekal. Is Punnu present here?
Yeah, hi, I'm present. Shall I
Okay.
start?
Yeah, probably because Kirti is not present, maybe we could start with your presentation. So is it okay if you start?
It's fine. Just give me 1 minute.
Yeah, sure.
Hello, I hope you can all hear me.
Yes.
Okay. So my topic for my paper, it's titled Breaking Chains, Caste Resistance in Bhimayana, Experiences of Untouchability and a Gardener in the Wasteland by Jyotiba Phule's Fight for Liberty. Now, as you all know, graphic novels in India have emerged as a pivotal medium for the exploration and representation of the multifaceted issues surrounding caste dynamics. Authored and illustrated by the individuals from diverse backgrounds, including Dalits, these graphic novels offer a platform for the expression of unique perspectives and personal experiences related to caste discrimination. They serve the crucial role of challenging stereotypes, providing insights into historical narratives surrounding the caste system and addressing contemporary issues such as discrimination and social justice. Moreover, graphic novels functions as educational tools, effectively raising awareness among a wide readership, including young adults and students, regarding the complexities of caste-related matters. Beyond the informative value, they also serve as avenues for aesthetic exploration, employing visual symbolism to convey intricate concepts related to caste, identity, and social hierarchy. Notable examples such as Bhimayana and A Gardener in the Wasteland exemplify the depth and the breadth of this medium's engagement with caste-related themes. Now I move on to the core of the paper, which is Dalit literature. Caste resistance writing, also known as Dalit literature, is a genre that confronts this caste-based discrimination and oppression prevalent in India. It critically examines and challenges the caste hierarchy, narrates the experiences of discrimination faced by Dalits, asserts the identity and culture, advocates for social justice, and subverts dominant narratives. According to Raj Kumar in Dalit Personal Narratives, by writing their autobiographies, Dalits are mobilizing resistance to fight against all forms of oppression which they have been experiencing for ages. Page 4. Often rooted in the historical context, it empowers marginalized communities, uses language to assert a distinctive voice, and plays a global role in highlighting issues of caste based inequality, making it a powerful force for social change and justice. Bhimayana serves as a semi-autobiographical work that draws extensively from B.R. Ambedkar's 20-page autobiographical sketch called Waiting for Visa, which was published posthumously in 1990. Beyond merely recounting Ambedkar's life, this graphic narrative offers a comprehensive critique of casteism in contemporary India. This critique is achieved by incorporating various textual elements such as newspaper reports dealing with atrocities against Dalits in contemporary India, excerpts from Ambedkar's speeches, excerpts from the Constitution of India, and quotes from figures like Gandhi, among others. These textual practices of adaptation, quotation, and genre blending are pivotal components of the narrative's dialogic structure. Bhimayana, Srividya Natarajan's A Gardener in the Wasteland, is also a graphical autobiography of a social reformer, Jyotiba Phule, based on his book Slavery, written in 1873. The graphic narrative presents a sharp and clever critique of Brahmanism and subjugation of India's lower caste that it gave rise to. Jyotiba Phule's book Gulamgiri, published in 1873, often translated as slavery, draws a parallel between casteism and slavery. In this work, Phule meticulously deconstructs the Vedic scriptures, which forms a significant part of Hindu religious texts, and reveals how they rationalize inequality and endorse discrimination in a caste-based society. Gulamgiri served as a radical manifesto for the Satyachodhak Samaj, an organization founded by Phule in 1873 in collaboration with his wife Savitribai Phule. The graphic narrative, A Gardener in the Wasteland, and Srividya Natarajan revisits Jyotiba Phule's groundbreaking work Gulamgiri. It explores the relevance and the persistence of caste-related issues in contemporary times, fostering a dialogue between the historical past and the present-day reality of a nation marked by caste divisions. The graphic retelling of Jyotiba Phule's struggle commences with author Srividya Natarajan and artist Aparijita Nainan discussing their plan to adapt Phule's Gulamgiri. Through a stroll through a suburb in New Delhi, they witness a distressing incident where a group of children is subjugated to casteist slurs and physically assaulted by upper caste man, all because they accidentally kicked a football into his house. As they pass by a banner advertising the popular superhero movie Batman Begins, Nainan expresses a belief in the necessity of superheroes who can swoop down out of the sky and kick the baddies to bits. Resistance in Bhimayana and A Gardener in the Wasteland. Conscientization is an educational process characterized by critical engagement with one's understanding of the world, leading individuals to actively reject established justifications for unequal power dynamics and oppression. In the book Cultural Action of Freedom, Paulo Freire explains that conscientization is first of all the effort to enlighten people about the obstacles preventing them from a clear perception of reality. Conscientization affects the ejection of cultural myths that confuse people's awareness. This process involves dispelling cultural myths that muddle people's thoughts. Rather than being a passive transfer of knowledge deposited into people's minds, Freire views conscientization as an active process that empowers individuals to, through critical reflection, challenge detrimental myths and inconsistencies. Freire's ideas about conscientization align with contemporary theories about how comics function. Comics fundamentally provide readers with the opportunity to actively build, analytically interpret, and consciously contemplate and connect with particular messages. In contrast to widely consumed mediums like movies and television shows, comics demand more engagement from their readers to establish fundamental meaning. Iris Marion Young, an American theorist and feminist, talks about the 5 phases of oppression in her book Justice and Politics of Difference in 1990. And these are exploitation, marginalization, powerlessness, cultural imperialism, and violence. Though she has arrived at her theory after studying the oppressed classes in America during 1960s, this same theory can be applied to the oppression in India because, as she says, in the most general sense, all oppressed people suffer from inhibition of their ability to develop and exercise their capacities and express their needs, thoughts, and feelings. in that abstract sense, all oppressed people face common conditions. The opening pages of Vimayana talks about the Kairlanji incident where the members of the scheduled caste were bludgeoned to death in view of the full people of the village. Their education and assertion of their right to life of dignity was enough to provoke violence. The discussion between two strangers regarding the massacre, which occurred on 29 September 2006 in the village of Kairlanji, Maharashtra, nearly 70 years after B.A. Ambedkar's fight against caste inequalities, brings us to the story of B.R. Ambedkar. Autobiographical and memoir writings by Dalit authors holds a significant place in the broader discourse on social justice, identity, and the fight against caste-based discrimination in India. These narratives represent a unique genre of literature that provides an intimate and first-hand perspective on the experiences and struggles faced by individuals belonging to historically marginalized Dalit communities. By recounting their personal journeys, these authors engage with the complexities of caste-based discrimination, offering a profound exploration of their identities and social positions. The Dalit autobiographical memoir tradition can be viewed as a form of counter-narrative against the prevailing hegemonic discourses that has historically silenced the voices and experiences of Dalits. These narratives often serve as powerful tools for challenging and dismantling deeply entrenched structures of caste-based oppression. By sharing their stories, Dalit writers bring to the forefront the harsh realities of social injustice and discrimination, making visible the otherwise hidden or ignored aspects of their lives. In the struggle to break free from domination, Foucault proposes that maybe the target, in quotes, maybe the target nowadays is not to discover what we are, but to refuse what we are. This is from Foucault's book 1982, page 216. In other words, he suggests that overcoming domination involves resisting the process of being defined and confined by external forces. Foucault posits that resistance emerges from the realm of freedom, which stands in contrast to power. He contends that power is only exercised, in quotes, power is only exercised over free subjects and only insofar they are free. The story of Ambedkar begins in Book 1, titled Water, where young Ambedkar is not allowed to touch the water tap at school because he is an untouchable. The teacher reprimands him for always being thirsty and attributes his thirst to his long hair. Quotes, if you cut your hair more often, you'll feel less thirsty. You look as though there are no barbers in Satara. Ambedkar thinks to himself, but doesn't she know barbers won't touch us Mahas? The graphic novel makes a strong statement against untouchability when Ambedkar says, in quotes, they have brushes for the buffalo and shears for the goat. They won't trim a Maha's hair. They'd rather cut his throat. Boys at the well, even beasts at the trough may drink till they burst, but the village turns a desert when I try to quench my thirst. While one must question the relevance of a graphic novel that represents the life of B.R. Ambedkar and related events from several decades ago, the stark reality is that the caste system has not been entirely eradicated and continues to cast its shadow over many regions in India. This graphic novel adeptly portrays the endurance of these oppressive practices through a compelling presentation of real-life incidents as reported in various newspapers in the recent years. These newspaper snippets reveal a distressing pattern of oppression against Dalits, ranging from instances of rape and murder to the denial of basic human rights, such as the access to water, shelter, and fair wages. Another relevant incident discussed in page 55 occurs almost 80 years after Ambedkar's fight for untouchables in the village of Chakwara near Jaipur. Dalits were refused to use a pond. When they finally won the right to use the village pond, the caste Hindus turned it into a sewer by defecating in it and dumping garbage. Such occurrences might challenge the assumption that caste-based oppression is confined solely to the rural areas, as corroborated by a conversation between the narrator within the graphic narrative. That is on page 73. This discussion sheds light on a 2008 incident in Delhi, where three Dalit siblings, in the midst of preparing for the civil service examinations, were brutally assaulted and forcibly expelled upon the revelation of their Dalit identity. In further illustration of the ongoing challenges, the graphic novel touches upon a disheartening episode on page 83, recounting an incident from 2007 when two Dalit women were evicted from a hospital in Kanpur and denied access to medical care solely on the basis of their Dalit background. These instances collectively underscore the enduring presence of the caste system and its deleterious effects, emphasizing that this systemic issue is not limited to rural communities or the less educated sections of society. In a manner much like the introductory pages of Bimayana, Srividya Natarajan's A Gardener in the Wasteland also introduces the story of a social reformer, Jyotiba Phule, through the conversation between two women narrators, Natarajan and Nainan, witnessing the unjust behavior of a man towards a low-caste boy for wrecking his property, calling him son of a chamar whore. The women wish for a superhero, much like Batman, who could reprimand the castes. This contemplation leads them to delve into the saga of Jyotiba Phule and his spouse Savitri Phule, regarded as societal superheroes for their pivotal role in combating the caste system prevalent in Pune, West India during 1840s. An intriguing narrative technique employed by the author is the utilization of a self-conscious meta-viewing format, wherein the presence of the narrators are shown in the same panel space as the characters of the story being told.
Punu, could you wrap it up in 2 minutes?
Okay. The narrative unfolds within a societal dominated by the so-called Brahmin mob, who believe in the notion that caste is merely a division of labor. The Brahmins, as the narrative delineates, enjoyed a pervasive privileges across domains such as landholding, finance, administration, education, and religion. Savitri Phule, positioned as a nexus of dual marginalization due to her gender and low caste identity, encountered myriad challenges. She faced societal reproach for her inclination towards work, defying conventional gender norms that expected her to prioritize familial obligations. Furthermore, her decision to engage in teaching, particularly educating girls from the Sudra and Atisudra communities, subjected her to further scorn. Her father-in-law, Govind Rao, faced threats for permitting his daughter-in-law to pursue a vocation perceived as incompatible with societal norms akin to that of a public woman. This dissonance of perspective eventually prompted Jyotiba and Savitri to sever ties with Jyotiba's paternal household. Kumar says that women were never encouraged education in their patriarchal social order. They were expected to put the family and their roles as wife, daughter, and mother above the individual identity. Okay, now I'll just move forward a bit because of the lack of time. Now, the multifaceted manifestation of discrimination, namely exploitation, marginalization, and powerlessness, emanate from the social organization of labor. In the Indian context, the delineation of labor roles was contingent upon one's caste affiliation, assigning specific occupation to particular castes. Breaking free from the entrenched confines of one's caste identity was nearly unattainable prior to the abolition of caste system. These classifications delineate the structural institution dynamic that circumscribe individuals' lives, encompassing but not exclusively their access to resources and tangible opportunities available or unavailable for the cultivation and exercise of their capabilities. The subsequent forms of expression, as posited by Young, is cultural. I don't think I have time to go through it in detail, so I'll just read the last bit.
Excuse me, Ponulis, you can continue because we have a little time, and you may want to continue for a bit. Sorry, Anu, for superseding you, but since we have time, we can go ahead because
then
the
I'll just
other
take a few
session.
more minutes.
Sure. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so the other forms of oppression as posited by Young is cultural imperialism. Experiencing cultural imperialism entails understanding how the prevailing interpretations within a society obscure the unique perspective of one's own group while simultaneously subjugating it to stereotyping and delineating it as other. This pervasive occurrence of cultural imperialism is discernible in both Bhimayana and Gardener in the Wasteland. The primary characters of the narrative, identified as Dalits, are systematically classified as the other within their existence, primarily relegated to serving the upper class Brahmins. Violence is the last phase of oppression, according to Young. Members of some group live with the knowledge that they must fear random, unprovoked attack on their persons or property which have no motive but to damage, humiliate, or destroy the person. Violence is systemic because it is directed at members of a group simply because they are members of the group. This kind of systemic violence is what is experienced by members of the lower caste in Bhimayana and Gardner in the Wasteland. Even though Ambedkar does not face any direct attack of violence on account of being an untouchable in Bhimayana, we can see many instances in quoted newspaper articles where Dalits were beaten up because of their caste. Dalit siblings thrashed by landlord on 5th May 2008. In Gardner in the Wastelands, Savitri Phule faces violent attacks for being a lower caste woman wanting to educate other women. Gardner the Wasteland also exposes the Manusmriti, which supported violence against untouchables and states that if the Sudra intentionally listens to the Veda with the intention of committing to memory, his ears should be filled with molten lead. If he utters the Veda, his tongue should be cut off. And if he have mastered the Veda, his body should be cut into pieces. A salient characteristic of indiscriminate systemic aggression lies in its inherent lack of rationality. It is this irrational behavior towards the lower caste that prompted them to resist such atrocity. Dalits in India contend with multifaceted resistance across various domains, reflecting a complex interplay of historical discrimination and contemporary struggles. Educational resistance constitutes a prominent aspect of the challenges, as Dalits have historically confronted formidable barriers to accessing education, discrimination within education institutions, and limited education opportunities have been pervasive issues. B.R. Ambedkar underscores the transformative role of education in empowering marginalized communities. Through Savitribai, Natarajan urges the readers to go, get an education, learn, and break the chain of caste on page 122. She goes on to enumerate the benefits of education, saying, education could open the third eye, it could make people critical, it could make people refuse to accept what was thrown at them in the name of religion and tradition. It could make women, Sudras and Ati Sudras, understand how they were being exploited. It could make people powerful, able to manage their own affairs, invulnerable to scamsters and graft takers. Page 121. Social resistance. Okay. In face of these numerous and disconcerting atrocities against Dalits, the reiteration of Ambedkar and Jyotiba Phule's narrative and the continued examination of the caste system's malevolent implications assume profound significance. These graphic novels serve as an instrument for raising awareness and fostering conscientization among its readers, compelling them to confront the stark realities of ongoing caste-based discrimination and inequality that persists in contemporary India. The relevance of these graphic narratives thus lies in its capacity to stimulate critical engagement and these pressing issues and inspire actions aimed at addressing them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Monoliz. So now we can open the floor for question and answers. I see there are around 22 people here, and all of us might have questions for each other, observations, comments, suggestions. You can unmute yourself directly. I will be taking care of that, or it will be better if you can raise your hand, create a queue, and I will be unmuting, or I will be asking one person after another to pose their question, or you can simply type the question in the chat box. If you have any questions, you can simply unmute yourself and ask it, or you can put your question in the chat box. Just to let you know, everybody who presented papers, everybody who participated, everybody who chaired sessions, they will be provided with certificates separately. Like there will be separate certificates for presenters, there will be separate certificates for chairs, and for audience rapporteurs will get a separate certificate. So there will be a number of certificates which will be provided by and by. And since session B is still on. The last presentation is going on. Um, we might take a break. I would suggest you not to leave the meeting, because the valedictory and the discussion session will officially take place through this link. I would take this opportunity to thank Anu Sugathan, the president of Society for Indian Graphic Novels, uh, which is a burgeoning society facilitating the study, research, and other activities on Indian comic books and graphic novels. Anybody who would wish to join us are welcome, and you could simply ask me. I'm in the group. My name is Pritesh, and you can. I would be happy to join you in the group if you are researching on Indian or on comics worldwide. So, Anu, do you have anything to add to this? Since we are, since you represent, you're the president of Sign, you might have to say something.
Yeah, thank you, Pritesh, for that, and also thank you for asking me to come here and join and hear few papers out as well. So, like Pritesh mentioned, we are a society that is trying to promote comics storytelling and also research around it, as well as a creative aspect around it. So if there are people who are interested in joining, I think Pritesh would be a right person to get in touch. And I can also see that Ponu has asked if it is possible to get a membership in Sign. So we are right now in the process of registering ourselves officially. So we do have social media presence as well as WhatsApp group where you can join, where you're welcome to join as well. So probably I can in the chat box I can leave the link for some of them, and you can talk about how to join the WhatsApp group. So if you would like to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, just put in the links of the social media handles, and I asked Ponu to contact me, like ping me on WhatsApp, and I'll give the link. There are a number of people who presented on graphic novels and comics in this international seminar. It just shows how much this area of research is becoming popular among researchers and scholars. So it's a great thing. Besides that, I also represent Maharaja Srischandra College, which is a college affiliated to Calcutta University in Kolkata, and soon the IQAC coordinator will join, because we are very early and they were supposed to have a different timeline. So they would talk a little bit about how the thing is organized, how this whole thing happened. And I would really take this opportunity to thank all the participants. Debbie might be in the other session, but we really worked very hard for this, and I think this is a success of an online international seminar, and I hope we will see more of this. Though there are no questions as such, we might just take a break of say 15 minutes and then join. What do you say, Oni?
Yeah, I think that sounds good. And in the meantime, if anybody wants to have more discussions, they could use the chat box to do that.
Yeah, sure. I am here, and do provide the links for the sign.
Yeah, I'm gonna. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm gonna do that.
Okay, all right. Because this is not just for like comic scholars. If you are interested in comics in general, like you want to know about artists, you want to know about scholars, their life, their struggles, you are welcome, and you can join us. You don't need to be anything to join us. We are very kind of open people, so you can join and you can give your own ideas, and who knows, someday somebody might create a comic book on this international conference that we had.